She was 10 years old, soaking wet from the November cold, and she walked into a biker bar like she owned the place, except her hands were shaking and her eyes were the eyes of someone who had already learned that the world does not protect little girls. She was carrying a bicycle. She wanted to sell it. And every man in that room, men who had buried brothers, men who had come back from wars nobody thanked them for, men who had learned to feel nothing, every single one of them went completely still. Because they all recognized what she was really selling. She was selling the last thing she had left. And she was doing it for someone else. What happens next will change everyone in this room, and nothing will ever be the same. Hey, if this story already has you leaning in, hit that like button right now, drop your city in the comments, tell us where in the world you're watching from tonight. We've got listeners from everywhere on these stories, and we love knowing you're out there. Now settle in. This one's going to take a while, and it's worth every minute. The bar didn't have a proper name anymore. The sign outside, Black Vultures Bar and Grill, Estart 1987, had lost its G and its R sometime in the early 2000s, and nobody had replaced them, so it just read Black Vultures, B-A and ill. Now, the remaining letters buzzing in amber neon against the black November sky, like something wounded that refused to die. The locals called it the Roost. The members called it home. The people who drove through Harlan County on their way to somewhere better didn't call it anything because they never stopped. That was fine. The men inside didn't want visitors. It was a Tuesday in the third week of November, cold enough that the mud in the parking lot had frozen into ridges that looked like small brown mountains. Cold enough that the breath of the men stepping outside for cigarettes hung in the air long after they'd gone back in. The kind of cold that didn't just get into your bones, it got into your decisions, made everything feel heavier, made the distance between where you were and where you wanted to be feel longer than it actually was. Eastern Kentucky. November cold. The kind that had driven men to drink, to churches, to violence, and to silence in equal measure for as long as anyone could remember. Inside the Roost, it was warm. Not comfortable exactly. The heating unit above the bar had been making a sound for 3 weeks that Big Eddie described as a cat getting divorced, but warm enough. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of draft beer and something frying in the kitchen that might have been onion rings. Merle Haggard was playing low on the jukebox, the same 3 songs rotating the way they always did on weekdays when nobody bothered to put in fresh quarters. The overhead lights were the color of old whiskey. The floor was dark-stained wood that had absorbed decades of boot traffic and spilled drinks and quiet conversations that were never meant to leave these walls. There were 11 men in the bar that night. 6 of them were Black Vultures, wearing the cut, belonging to the table in the back corner that was technically available to anyone but had never once in recorded memory been occupied by anyone who wasn't a member. The other 5 were regulars, people who lived close enough to the Roost that it had become an extension of their living rooms. A retired mine foreman named Cecil, who drank exactly 2 beers every Tuesday and Thursday, and had done so for 19 years. A younger man named Daryl, who was between jobs and between decisions, and had been between both for long enough that people had stopped asking. A woman named June, who bartended 3 nights a week, and spent the other nights at the bar on the paying side because she said the quiet was better here than at her apartment. Ronan Creed was at the back table. He was 53 years old and looked it, not in a broken way, but in the way of a man who had simply been present for a large number of difficult things and hadn't tried to look younger than he was. Gray hair, close-cropped, the kind of gray that had come in all at once in his early 40s rather than gradual. A beard that was more salt than pepper now. Hands that were large and scarred across the knuckles in ways that some people read as violent and some people read as work, and both readings were partially accurate. He was wearing a Black Vultures cut over a black thermal, and the president's patch sat on his chest like something he'd earned and never particularly wanted. He was nursing a bourbon he'd been nursing for 40 minutes. Across from him, Dart, whose full name was Darnell Outerbridge, a name he had not voluntarily spoken in public since 1998, was doing what Dart usually did, which was sitting with his arms crossed and watching the room with the kind of patient, contained attention that had kept him alive in places that should have killed him. Dart was 47, black, built like something that had been designed specifically to not move when pushed, and he was the Vulture's sergeant-at-arms in both title and instinct. He had 2 silver stars from a war nobody mentioned at dinner anymore. He had a scar along his left jaw that he would deflect questions about with a look that ended conversations. He drank Coca-Cola, always, because he had made a decision about alcohol 14 years ago and had not revisited it. To Ronan's left was Shepard, Marcus Webb, road name Shepard, 41, a mechanic of extraordinary skill and ordinary conversation who had joined the Vultures 8 years ago after leaving a hospital and a marriage and a version of himself he no longer recognized. Shepard was lean and quiet and wore his hair pulled back and had a habit of tapping his fingers against any flat surface when he was thinking, which was most of the time. The other 3 at the table were Hollis, Cage, and a newer member everyone called Brick, who was 26 and still in the process of understanding what he'd joined and whether it matched what he'd needed. They weren't talking much. This was normal. The Vultures were not a social club in the way the phrase implied warmth or ease. They were a brotherhood in the older sense. The sense that came from shared weight, from knowing who would answer the phone at 3 in the morning and who would show up without being asked. They talked when there was something to say. They were quiet when there wasn't. They'd been doing this long enough that the silence between them was comfortable the way old furniture is comfortable. Not because it's soft, but because it fits. The jukebox shifted to something slower. Dart's Coca-Cola was getting flat. Ronan had been staring at something above the bar's back shelf for 10 minutes, which meant he was thinking about something he wasn't going to talk about. And everyone at the table understood this without it being said. Then the door opened. The cold came in first, the way it always does. That particular November cold, sharp and immediate, cutting through the warmth of the bar in the half-second before the door swung shut again. Everyone felt it. Most didn't look up. Daryl looked up. June looked up. Cecil did not. Ronan looked up. She was small. That was the first thing. Small in the way that children are small, a smallness that was just physical fact and had nothing fragile about it. She was carrying herself upright, her spine straight, her chin level, in the careful, controlled way of someone who has decided that the most important thing right now is to not show weakness. She had dark hair that was damp from the cold and pulled back with a rubber band that wasn't quite doing its job. She was wearing a coat that was the right size for the cold, which meant someone had thought about her, which registered somewhere in Ronan's mind as important without him knowing yet why. She was 10, maybe 11. He couldn't tell at first glance, and it wouldn't have mattered. She was holding a bicycle, not carrying it, holding it upright beside her the way you hold something you're trying to present. It was a girl's bike, blue, with a white seat and a small silver bell on the handlebars and streamers that had been blue once and were now weathered to almost white. It had seen weather and distance. The back tire was slightly low. Someone had loved it. The girl looked at the bar the way someone looks at a room they've studied from the outside but never entered, taking in the geography, noting the exits, locating the people. Her eyes moved through the space with a precision that was not normal for a child, and that Ronan recognized because he had seen that kind of scanning before, in himself, in Dart, in men who had learned to read rooms because rooms had not always been safe. June said, from behind the bar, "Honey, this isn't—" "I know what it is," the girl said. Her voice was clear and steady and not loud. She wasn't being rude. She was being precise. "I'm looking for the Black Vultures." The table in the back went very quiet, in a way that was different from the quiet it had already been. Ronan set down his bourbon. "You found them," he said. She looked at him, directly at him, not scanning anymore, just looking, with dark eyes that were taking his measure the way adults do when they're deciding whether to trust someone with something important. She held his gaze for a moment, then carried the bicycle across the bar floor, the wheels making a soft sound against the wood, until she was standing at the edge of the back table. "I need to sell my bike," she said. The room was still. June had gone still. Daryl had gone still. Dart was watching the girl with an expression that wasn't surprise. Dart didn't do surprise, but was something more careful than his normal watching. Brick opened his mouth. Ronan looked at him. Brick closed his mouth. "Sit down," Ronan said to the girl. Not an order. The tone he used when he meant it as something other than an order. She sat. She kept the bicycle upright beside the chair, her hand on the handlebar, and she sat with her back straight and her feet flat on the floor, and she looked at Ronan across the table and waited. "What's your name?" Ronan said. "Avery." "Avery what?" A pause. Not long. "Boone." "How old are you, Avery Boone?" 10. "How'd you get here?" "Rode my bike." "It's 2 miles from town." "I know." Ronan looked at her. She looked back. The bar had gone the kind of quiet where even the jukebox seemed to understand it wasn't the moment. Merle Haggard faded out between tracks and didn't come back. "Tell me about the bike," Ronan said. She looked down at it, then back at him. "It works," she said. "The back tire needs air, but the chain is good and the brakes work fine. My dad bought it for me when I was 7. She stopped. Something moved across her face. Not grief exactly, more like the management of grief, the practiced suppression of it. "I need the money." "How much money?" $60. She said it like she had done the arithmetic and arrived at this number carefully. "That's for the medicine and the copay." "Medicine for who?" "My mom." Ronan was quiet. He could feel Dart watching him. He could feel the whole table watching him, the way they watched whenever he was in the process of deciding something, and he hated that and had never found a way to tell them to stop. "What's wrong with your mom?" Avery's jaw tightened, just slightly, the kind of tightening that happens when someone is deciding how much of the truth to give. "She fell," Avery said. The word sat in the air between them, and Ronan let it sit there without touching it, because he had heard the word "fell" used this particular way before, in this particular tone, and he understood what it contained. "When?" he said. "This morning." "She see a doctor." "She doesn't want to go to the emergency room." Avery said it without inflection, like she was reporting data. "She says it's not bad enough, but she needs the prescription filled, and we don't have—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "We don't have enough." Ronan looked at her hands. They were folded in her lap now, very still. Children's hands, small-knuckled, but held with an adult stillness that meant she had practiced this stillness, had needed it. "Avery," he said, "how long has your mom been falling?" She looked at him, and something shifted in her face. Not breaking, not crying, nothing so simple as that. It was more like a wall that had been holding something back, just adjusted, resettled, like she had been carrying a weight and had, for 1 second, decided it was okay to acknowledge how heavy it was. 4 months, she said quietly. Nobody at the table moved. "What's his name?" Dart said from across the table. His voice was level and careful. Avery looked at Dart. She looked at him for a long time, and Dart didn't look away, and it was not a threatening thing. It was a steady thing, a patient thing, the look of a man who was going to wait as long as it took. "Travis?" she said. "Travis Kane." Shepard exhaled slowly through his nose. Hollis, beside him, looked down at the table. "He lives with you," Ronan said. "He moved in July." She paused. "He has a key now." July to November, 4 months. Ronan ran the arithmetic without wanting to, and felt the result of it settle into his chest like something cold. "Is he there now?" he said. "No, he goes out on Tuesdays." She said it the way you say something you've memorized, something you've tracked, because tracking it is survival. "He comes back late. That's why I came tonight." "You planned this," Dart said. It wasn't a question. "I've been watching you," she said. And then, because that could have sounded strange, she added, "I've seen you help people. Mrs. Grady on Picker Road, the Teller family when their house flooded. I've seen what you do." Ronan felt something happen behind his sternum that he didn't try to name. "How long have you been watching?" he said. "Since August. When things got—" She stopped again. "When I knew I needed a plan." She was 10 years old. She had spent 2 months developing a contingency plan that involved a motorcycle club, and she had executed that plan on a Tuesday night in November because she had tracked her abuser's schedule carefully enough to know which nights were safe. She had ridden 2 miles in the cold with a bicycle she was willing to sell. The word that came to Ronan's mind was survivor. He pushed it away because it felt too much like giving up on something. "You're not selling the bike," he said. "I need the $60. You're not selling the bike." He said it the same way, same tone, not louder. "Shepard." Shepard was already reaching for his wallet. "I don't want charity," Avery said, and she said it sharply, with the particular pride of someone who had been taught to be ashamed of needing things. "It's not charity," Shepard said, setting bills on the table. "It's the going rate for information about someone causing problems in our county." She looked at the money, then at Shepard. "You can call it what you want," she said carefully. "I'm calling it what it is." Shepard pushed the bills toward her. "Take it." She took it. She folded it and put it in her coat pocket with a care that said she didn't have much practice with cash. Ronan watched her. "Tell me about your house," he said. "Where you live, the layout, who else is in the building." And she told him. She told him about the duplex on Sycamore Street, the one with the broken gutters and the porch light that had been out for 6 weeks, and the landlord who didn't answer his phone. She told him about the upstairs neighbors, an older couple named the Beaumonts, who were kind and partially deaf, and had no idea what happened in the unit below them. She told him about the door that stuck and had to be lifted slightly as you turned the handle. She told him about where her mother slept and where she slept and where Travis kept his things. She told him about the bruises in a flat, factual voice that was worse than crying would have been. She told him about the time in September when she had called the police. She said it without drama, just reported it. She had called, the officers had come, Travis had been very calm and very polite and very good at explaining, and the officers had left after 20 minutes and Travis had not touched her mother that night. But he had looked at Avery in a way that she described only as like he was deciding something, and she had understood that calling the police had made things worse rather than better, and she had not called again. When she was done, the bar was very quiet. Cecil, at the end of the bar, had his eyes on his beer and had not looked up in 10 minutes. Daryl had gotten up and moved to the far end of the room, facing the wall, and Ronan understood that this was because Daryl was a father. June had her arms folded across the bar surface and was staring at the middle distance. Ronan looked at the table. He looked at Dart, and Shepard, and Hollis, and Cage, and Brick. He looked at their faces, which were doing various versions of what faces do when people are trying to stay controlled, because losing control right now would not help the child in front of them. He looked at Avery. She had not cried. She was watching him with those dark, assessing eyes, and she was waiting. "Is your mom awake?" he said. "She was when I left." "Does she know you came here?" "No?" A pause. She would have said don't. "Why?" "Because she doesn't want—" She stopped. "She thinks it's her problem." Ronan's jaw tightened. "It's not." "I know," Avery said, "but she doesn't." He stood up. The sound of his chair against the wood floor was quiet, but every person in the bar heard it, and there was something in the way he stood that said the decision had already been made and what came next was logistics. "Dart," he said. "Yeah." "Call Hendricks. Tell him we might need a walkthrough on a residential." Dart was already pulling out his phone. "Shepard? Hollis? You're with me." He looked at Avery. "You ride with Shepard. You keep your bicycle." "I can ride. Not tonight," he said, and his voice had a gentleness in it that surprised her. "It's cold, and it's dark, and you've already done enough tonight. You ride with Shepard." She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded. The bar came back to life in the particular way it did when the vultures were moving. Not chaotic, not loud, just purposeful, each man knowing what part he played without being told. Dart was on the phone. Hollis was pulling on his jacket. Cage moved to the bar and said something quiet to June, who nodded and moved to the back room. Brick was watching Ronan with the expression of someone who was understanding for the first time what the club actually was. Ronan pulled on his cut and stood for a moment, feeling the weight of it across his shoulders the way he always did. Familiar, heavy, real. He thought about a girl named Caitlin. He thought about her the way he always did, which was sideways without letting himself look directly at the thought. His daughter. 11 years ago. A different kind of failure, a different kind of loss, a different kind of man standing helpless while a child needed protection he hadn't known how to give. He had carried that weight for 11 years, and it had not gotten lighter. He picked up his bourbon and finished it. He set the glass down. "Let's go," he said. The engines woke up one at a time in the parking lot, that deep muscular sound that was never just mechanical, that was something else, something that started in the chest and moved through the cold air like a declaration. 5 bikes. Headlights cutting through the November darkness in long, white lines, the frozen mud cracking under tires. Avery sat behind Shepard, her arms around his waist, the blue bicycle secured across the back of Cage's bike with 2 bungee cords and a precision that Cage brought to everything he did. She had been on a motorcycle before. She'd been on a lot of things she'd had to decide on the fly. But this felt different, slower than she'd expected, more deliberate. The convoy pulled out onto the county road, and the cold hit her face, and she tightened her grip on Shepard's jacket and watched the dark hills of eastern Kentucky slide past on both sides, and tried to think about what was waiting at the end of this ride without letting the fear of it close her throat. 2 miles from the roost. She had ridden those 2 miles herself, in the dark, alone, with a bicycle she'd been willing to give up. She thought about that, about the version of herself that had left the duplex 2 hours ago and what that person had believed was possible. She thought about the men riding around her and ahead of her, the amber light of their instruments, the sound of their engines in the cold air. And she thought about the fact that she had been right. She had watched, and she had waited, and she had been right. She did not let herself feel relieved. Not yet. Sycamore Street was on the south edge of town, a block and a half from a closed Dollar General and a gas station that was open until 9. The houses here were old and tired in that particular way of houses that had never had money spent on them beyond what was necessary to keep them standing. Siding that had once been white or yellow or green and had settled into a universal gray, porches with boards that gave underfoot, cars in driveways that may or may not have still run. The duplex where Elena and Avery Boone lived was a 2-story house split down the middle, the left unit occupied by the Beaumonts upstairs and Avery's family below. The front porch light was out, as Avery had said. The living room window showed light, thin, dim, the light of a lamp rather than an overhead, the kind of light you use when the brightness hurts. The bikes cut their engines half a block away, one at a time, so that by the time they reached the house, they were gliding forward in relative quiet. It was not a coincidence. They had done this before. Ronan stood off his bike and stood in the street for a moment, looking at the house. He could feel the cold of the asphalt through the soles of his boots, could smell someone's fireplace from a house down the block. He looked at Avery, who had slid off Shepard's bike and was standing beside it, holding her handlebar. "Stay out here," he said. "She doesn't know you." "I know." He held her gaze. "Which is why I need you to come up to the door first, and then I need you to stay out here." She considered this, nodded. The porch boards shifted under their weight as Ronan and Avery approached the door. Shepard stayed at the bottom of the steps. Dart had moved to the side yard without being asked, in the quiet way Dart had of positioning himself where he'd be most useful. Avery knocked. 3 knocks, specific rhythm, the kind of knock that said, "It's me." And after a moment there was a sound from inside, a sound of movement, slow movement, the sound of someone who was moving carefully because moving quickly hurt. The door opened. Elena Boone was 32 years old and looked older in the way that certain kinds of pain-age people, not their features exactly, but something in the way they hold themselves, the way the face makes decisions about what to show and what to protect. She was slight, dark-haired like Avery, wearing a thick cardigan over pajama pants, her feet in worn slippers. There was bruising along her cheekbone that had gone from red to purple, and she was holding her left side in the specific way that meant ribs. Not pressing, just protecting, the unconscious gesture of someone whose body had learned to guard itself. She looked at Avery. "I told you to stay inside, Mom." "Avery, I told you, Mom." Avery's voice was steady. "Look." Elena looked past her daughter at Ronan, who was standing slightly back from the door in the porch darkness, and she pulled in a breath and her hand tightened on the door frame. Not a violent movement, just the reflex of a body that had learned to prepare itself. "Ma'am," Ronan said. His voice was low, level. "My name is Ronan Creed. I'm not here to cause you any trouble." He paused. Your daughter came to us tonight. She was brave enough to ask for help. Elena looked at Avery. Avery looked back at her. Something passed between them in that look, something complex and wordless and years long, the communication between a mother and a child who have been sharing a secret neither of them wanted to keep but hadn't known how to put down. Avery. He needs to know, Avery said quietly. I'm sorry, Mom. He needs to know. Elena's eyes went back to Ronan. She was reading him the way Avery had read the bar, taking inventory, looking for threat, looking for the thing that came next. He held still and let her look, because he understood that this was necessary, and that rushing it would destroy it. I don't need help, Elena said. It was the thing she had to say. He heard the thing underneath it. Nobody does, Ronan said, until they do. A long silence. The cold moved around them. Elena's grip on the doorframe slowly loosened. She opened the door wider. The inside of the duplex was small and clean, in the fierce way of someone who exercised control over the things she could control. The living room had a couch and a coffee table and a small bookshelf full of paperbacks and children's books, and a television that wasn't on. There was a lamp in the corner that was the source of the dim light from outside, warm-toned, gentle. There was a child's drawing on the refrigerator visible through the kitchen doorway. There was the faint smell of instant soup and something floral from a candle that had been burning on the bookshelf and had recently been blown out. Shepard came inside. Hollis came inside. They moved quietly, without talking, taking in the space with the attention of men who had learned that you understand a place by walking through it. Elena stood in the center of the room and watched them with her arms folded across herself. Protective posture, held breath posture, and Avery stood beside her and put her hand in her mother's hand and held it, and Elena looked down at her daughter's hand and something in her face changed, got complicated in a way that made her look exactly her age and younger than that at the same time. The upstairs neighbors, Ronan said. They home. They go to bed at 9. Elena's voice was quiet. They won't hear anything unless... Nobody's going to hear anything, Ronan said. She looked at him. You don't know Travis. Tell me. And so she told him. She told him in the voice of someone who had rehearsed this story many times in their own head and never out loud. The voice of someone who was discovering that saying the words to a room full of people made them more real rather than less, which was terrifying in a way she hadn't fully anticipated. She told him about how it had started. Not violently, never violently at the start, something smoother and colder than that. The criticism, the isolation, the way her friends had stopped calling and she hadn't understood at first that she'd stopped being allowed to call them back. The way he'd handled money, then her money, then the concept of her having money, the way he'd talked about Avery, the subtle, persistent erosion of the idea that Elena was a good mother, that she was capable, that she could do this on her own. Then July, him moving in, then August, when the isolation became walls, then September, when he first put his hands on her. She told it steadily, mostly. There were places where her voice changed, and she stopped for a moment and looked at the middle distance, and Avery held her hand and didn't say anything. And these were the places that Ronan filed carefully in his memory. Not because he needed the details, but because he understood that being witnessed when you tell the story is sometimes the first part of being able to survive it. Shepard was by the window. Hollis had sat in the chair near the bookshelf. Ronan stood near the couch, not sitting. He never sat in a stranger's space without being invited, and this hadn't been an invitation to sit. It had been an invitation to listen. He listened. When Elena finished, the room held the silence that follows something true. The prescription, Ronan said. You have it. It's on the counter. Ribs, Shepard said from across the room. Not a question. Elena looked at him. 2, I think. Maybe 3. I can breathe. Shepard nodded. Breathing means probably cracked, not broken. Still needs imaging. I'm not going to the emergency room. Not tonight, he said. Tonight's handled. But in the morning, someone's going to take you. She started to refuse. Someone's going to take you, he said again, in the same even tone. It's already decided. She looked at Ronan. He's right, Ronan said. Elena looked at her daughter, who was watching her with a kind of naked hope that Elena had been trying to protect her from having hope, because hope had been used against them before. But here it was anyway, on her daughter's face, because her daughter had gone out into the November dark and brought back something. "Okay," Elena said quietly. Hollis got up and went to the kitchen for the prescription without being asked. Cage came in through the front door and said quietly to Ronan, "Problem." Ronan looked at him. Headlights just turned onto Sycamore, coming slow. The air in the room changed. Elena went rigid. Her arms folded tighter across her ribs, and she made a sound that wasn't quite a sound, Sean. More of an intake that didn't complete, a breath that hit a wall. Avery's face went still. She went still in the particular way of a child who has had to learn to go still, who has practiced the art of becoming small and invisible and unremarkable in the presence of something dangerous. She went still from the feet up, starting with her feet going flat against the floor and traveling upward through her whole body until even her face was still, and what was left on it, underneath the stillness, was the thing that children should never have on their faces. "How long?" Ronan said to Cage, and his voice had changed without changing. It was still level, still quiet, but there was something in it now that was different from conversation. 2 minutes? Cage said. Maybe less. "He's early," Elena said. Her voice was very controlled and very frightened at once. "He's never early on Tuesdays." "He's early tonight," Ronan said. He turned to look at Avery, who was standing very still beside her mother, and he held her gaze until she looked at him, and he kept his voice level and even. "Nothing is going to happen to you tonight," he said. "Do you understand me?" She looked at him. She looked at him the way someone looks when they've been told something like that before, when they know the gap between the thing people say and the thing that actually happens, when they've learned not to spend too much on promises. But she also looked at him like she wanted to believe it. "I understand," she said. The headlights swept across the front window of the duplex. Travis Kane was home. Ronan turned to face the door, and as he turned, he felt the men behind him do the same. That quiet, unhurried rearrangement that was not aggression but was presence. And presence was sometimes more effective than aggression, because aggression was something you could argue with, and presence was just a fact. The door handle turned. The door lifted slightly as it opened, the way Avery had described. Travis Kane stepped into the house and into a living room full of men he had not expected to find there, and in the half second before his expression organized itself, Ronan saw exactly what he was. Saw it the way you see things when you've spent enough time looking at people who use control as a weapon. He was 40 years old, medium build, wearing a work jacket, conventionally unremarkable in a way that Ronan had learned was sometimes deliberate. His face was already moving toward affronted indignation, toward the performance of a reasonable man confronted with an unreasonable situation. And Ronan had seen that performance before and had no interest in watching it now. Travis's eyes moved through the room, landed on Ronan, moved to Elena, to Avery, back to Ronan. "What the hell?" he said. "This is my house." "It's her house," Ronan said. Travis looked at Elena. "Who are these people? Why are there—" "Travis," Elena said. Her voice was attempting its normal register, the managed, careful tone of 4 months of management. "Let me explain." "She doesn't need to explain anything," Ronan said. "I do." He looked at Travis and took a single step forward. Not aggressive, not threatening, just closing the distance enough to make the conversation between two people instead of across a room. "My name is Ronan Creed. I'm president of the Black Vultures MC. We're here because this woman and this child needed someone to be here." Travis looked at Ronan, then at the men behind him, at Dart, who had come in through the back without making sound, at Shepard, at Hollis, at Cage, at the leather, at the patches. His jaw set. "You need to leave," Travis said. "All of you. This is a private residence and—" "We'll leave," Ronan said, "when we're satisfied." Satisfied with what? The indignation was still performing, but there was something else underneath it now, something reading the room the way the room needed to be read, something recalculating. "With her being okay," Ronan said, "and with you understanding something." Travis looked at Elena again. "Is this what you wanted?" he said. and his voice had a particular flatness to it that Ronan recognized. The flatness of someone who was already arranging a punishment for later, who was filing this, storing it. "You brought strangers into our house." "I didn't bring them," Elena said quietly. "Your daughter, then." His eyes went to Avery, and Ronan felt every man in the room register that movement. "Your daughter went behind your back and—" "Don't," Ronan said. Travis looked at him. "Don't look at her," Ronan said. "Don't talk about her. In fact—" He turned slightly, just enough to make it a gesture without it being a command. "Shepard, take Avery to the kitchen, please." Shepard moved. Travis said, "Wait." "The kitchen," Ronan said again, and Shepard was already there, already moving Avery through the doorway with a hand on her shoulder, gentle and matter-of-fact. And Avery went because she was 10 years old, and she had done the thing she needed to do, and now the men were handling it. And she went to the kitchen, and Ronan heard the sound of Shepard's voice, low and quiet, talking about something unrelated. She later said he'd talked to her about the constellations visible in November. And that sound, that ordinary patient conversation happening in the kitchen, was somehow the most significant thing in the room. Travis stood in the doorway of his own home, or the home he had moved into, the home he had occupied the way something occupies a space rather than living in it. And he looked at Ronan, and he was doing the calculation that men like him do, the calculation that was really a question: is this winnable? Ronan watched him do it. He already knew the answer Travis was going to arrive at. "Elena," Travis said, switching approach, softening his voice in the practiced way. "Honey, tell them it's fine. Tell them they need to go." Elena was looking at a point somewhere to the left of Travis's shoulder. Her arms were still folded across her ribs. She was standing in her living room in her worn slippers, and she was very, very still. She didn't say anything. Travis's jaw tightened fractionally. "Elena." "She's thinking," Ronan said. "I'm not talking to you." "I know," Ronan said. "But she is." Another recalculation. Travis looked at Dart, who had come to stand 3 feet to Ronan's right and was watching Travis with the quiet, patient, absolute attention of someone for whom situations like this one were not novel. Dart had been in places where the stakes were genuinely, catastrophically high, and he brought that experience to all subsequent situations in the form of a stillness that was very hard to be in the presence of. Travis looked at the room. He looked at Elena. She was looking at the point to the left of his shoulder, and she was thinking, and what she was thinking was visible in her face, visible to Ronan, visible to the men behind him, visible probably to Travis, because some things we think are hidden are not hidden at all. They are just unacknowledged, and acknowledging them is what changes things. "I'm going to go get my things," Elena said. The words fell into the room like stones into water. Travis went very still. "Elena." "My things," she said again. "Mine and Avery's. We're going somewhere else tonight." She looked at Ronan for the first time since Travis had entered the room, and what was in her eyes was not relief yet, not safety yet, but something more foundational than either of those. A decision. "Is that okay?" "That's exactly okay," Ronan said. Travis moved. Not fast, not violent. But he moved toward Elena with his hand coming up, and the room responded before it decided to. Dart's hand on Travis's forearm, one hand, not gripping, just there, present, undeniable, a wall that appeared where there had not been a wall, and Travis's forward motion stopped as absolutely as if he'd walked into something solid. "Don't," Dart said. One word. Travis looked at Dart's hand on his arm, looked at Dart's face, looked at the room. He did not move. "Go get your things," Ronan said to Elena. She went. Avery came out of the kitchen doorway and looked at Ronan across the room and said nothing. He looked back at her. Her face was still careful, still watchful, but there was something in it that had shifted from the look she'd had in the bar. Something that was not quite hope, but was the place where hope starts. The place before you let yourself trust it. Travis stood with Dart's hand still on his arm, not gripping, not requiring anything, just present. And he looked at Ronan with a kind of hatred that was also a kind of fear. And Ronan had seen this before too, had seen the moment when a person whose power is entirely constructed from other people's fear discovers that the fear has been interrupted, and he felt nothing about it except a kind of cold tiredness. The sounds of Elena moving through the back bedroom came through the walls, dresser drawers, closet doors, the particular focused sounds of someone packing quickly and correctly. Outside, the November wind moved against the windows. Somewhere down the block, a dog was barking at something in the dark. The jukebox at the Roost was probably playing Merle Haggard again by now. Ronan stood in the middle of a stranger's living room and watched the door and waited for the sound of a woman packing her life into whatever bags she had. And he thought about Caitlin, and he thought about the night 11 years ago when he hadn't been there, when there had been no one in any room standing between what she faced and what happened to her, and he pressed the thought back down where he kept it, where it lived, where it had been living for 11 years without him finding a way to put it somewhere else. He didn't try tonight. He just stood. He waited. And somewhere in the back of the house, Elena Boone was packing. She was moving quickly. And then there was a sound from the driveway. Not an engine, not footsteps. Something else. Something electronic. A brief, sharp tone, like a text notification through a car speaker. And then Cage, who had stayed near the front window, turned his head toward Ronan with an expression that said, "Something else is coming." "What?" Ronan said quietly. "Someone called him," Cage said, "before he pulled up. I clocked it, but I thought it was nothing." He paused. "There's another vehicle that just turned onto the street. Different plates." Travis, across the room, had heard this. Something in his face changed. Not fear, something worse than fear, something that looked like anticipation. "Who'd you call?" Ronan said. Travis looked at him. "Before you came in tonight," Ronan said. "Who'd you call?" Travis's jaw moved, not speaking, just moving in the particular way of someone who is deciding whether to be afraid or to let you be afraid. "His brother," Avery said from the kitchen doorway. Everyone looked at her. She met Ronan's eyes. "Danny Kane," she said, and her voice was very careful. "He's a deputy." The room went completely still. Outside, through the front window, headlights were visible on Sycamore Street. They were moving slow, and they were stopping in front of the house. The headlights didn't hurry. That was the thing Ronan noticed first, the way the vehicle came down Sycamore Street without any urgency at all, slow and deliberate, the way something comes when it already knows what it's arriving to. When you're in a hurry, you drive like you're in a hurry. When you're making a point, you drive like you're making a point. The vehicle outside was making a point, and everyone in the living room of the Boone duplex felt it in the way the light from the headlight swept across the front window, slow arc, full stop, engine cutting to silence. A door opened. One door. Footsteps on frozen ground. Travis Kane hadn't moved. Dart's hand was no longer on his arm. Hadn't been for the last 2 minutes. Hadn't needed to be. But Travis was still standing in the same position he'd occupied when Dart had stopped him, like the geography of that moment had left a mark on the air and he was standing inside it. His eyes were on the front window. His jaw was set in the particular way of a man who has called for backup and is now in the process of deciding how much the backup will cost him later. "Danny Kane," Ronan said. Not a question. "He's patrol," Travis said. "He's just—" "I know what he is," Ronan said. He looked at Cage, who was still near the window. Cage gave him 2 fingers. One vehicle, one person. Ronan nodded once. He turned to Dart. "Hendricks," he said quietly. "Called him 20 minutes ago," Dart said. "He's on shift until midnight." "Where?" "Dispatch has him on Route 9. 20 minutes out, maybe." 20 minutes. Ronan ran it. The sound of Elena still moving in the back bedroom, quieter now, more careful. The sound of Avery in the kitchen doorway, still watching him. The sound of the November wind against the old windows of this house, and underneath it, all the sound of footsteps coming up the porch steps and across the boards that gave under weight. A knock, 3 times. The knock of someone who knows the door. Travis said, "That's my brother. You want to think about what you're doing here?" "Already thought about it," Ronan said. He went to the door himself. He did it deliberately. Not Dart, not Cage, not Hollis. Him. Because the statement he needed to make needed to be made by the person whose name was on the patch. He opened the door. Danny Kane was 36, in uniform, wearing his Harlan County Sheriff's Department jacket over the gray shirt with the star on the chest. He was shorter than Travis by 2 inches and built differently. Leaner, quicker looking, with the kind of face that had learned early that smiling was a tool. He was smiling now, a measured, professional smile, the kind that said, "I'm in charge of how this goes," before anything had been said. He looked at Ronan. He looked at the cut. The smile stayed exactly where it was. "Evening," Danny Kane said. "I got a call about a disturbance." "No disturbance," Ronan said. "Family matter. We were just leaving." "That right?" Danny's eyes moved past Ronan into the room, landed on Travis. Something passed between the brothers. Fast, wordless, the shorthand of people who have been communicating in code for a long time. Then Danny's eyes moved to the rest of the room, taking inventory the way cops take inventory, and Ronan watched him do it, and watched what his face did when it registered Dart, which was nothing, and then watched what his face did when it registered the room overall. 5 large men in leather in a small living room, which was also nothing, carefully nothing, the nothing of someone who has already decided on his position. "I'm going to need to come in," Danny said. "You're going to need a reason," Dart said from across the room. Danny looked at Dart. The smile adjusted fractionally. "I have a report of—" "From who?" Dart said. A pause. "Concerned neighbor." "Beaumonts are both deaf and asleep," Dart said. "So that's interesting." Danny looked at his brother again. Travis's expression shifted, subtle, the particular shift of a man recalibrating his story. "Officer," Ronan said, and he let the word carry just enough weight without overpressuring it. "The woman who lives here had an accident. We're friends of the family. We were helping her get set up for the night, and now we're leaving. There is no disturbance, there's no complaint from the resident, and unless you've got something more specific than a concerned neighbor who apparently lives in a building full of people who weren't concerned, I'll need to speak to Ms. Boone," Danny said. "She's getting ready to go." "Go where?" "That's her business." Danny's jaw moved. The smile was mostly gone now, replaced by something that was professionally neutral and personally irritated, which was a combination Ronan had dealt with enough times to be comfortable with. Danny Kane was deciding, could feel him deciding, whether the political cost of escalating this was worth the outcome his brother needed tonight. "I don't think you understand the situation here," Danny said. "I understand it fine," Ronan said. "These are private citizens in a private residence, and you and your—" He gestured vaguely at the men behind Ronan in a way that was meant to be dismissive and wasn't quite. "Your people are here uninvited." "We were invited," Ronan said. "By the resident." From the back of the house, Elena's voice. "Danny?" Everyone went still. She was standing in the hallway holding a duffel bag in one hand and a child's backpack in the other. She had changed into jeans and a sweater, and she still had her arms partially across her ribs, but she was standing straight, and her face had something in it now that Ronan had not seen in it before. Not anger, not bravado, something quieter and more durable than either. She looked at Danny Kane, and she said his name one more time. "Danny." "Elena." His voice shifted too. Became something that sounded like concern, but had the structure of management. "I just want to make sure you're okay. Nobody's trying to—" "I'm leaving for the night," she said. "That's all." "You don't have to—" "I know I don't have to." She held his gaze. "I'm choosing to." A long silence. Danny looked at his brother. Travis's face had gone through several things in the last 30 seconds. It had gone through controlled anger and then recalibration, and then something that Ronan recognized as genuine surprise. Because men like Travis Kane rarely encountered the thing they were encountering right now, which was the person they'd built a system of control around simply walking out of the system. The system depended on the person believing the system was permanent. Elena was not behaving like someone who believed the system was permanent. "Elena," Travis said. His voice had changed again, softer now, the register of someone who had learned that softness is its own kind of pressure. "Just wait. We can talk about this. Whatever these people told you, whatever Avery said, she's a child and she—" "Don't," Ronan said. Travis looked at him. "You keep coming back to the child," Ronan said. "Stop doing that." Travis looked at him with that look again, the one that contained hatred and fear and calculation all at once. And then he looked at Danny. Danny put his hand up slightly. A small gesture. Slow down. All right, Danny said. He looked at Elena. If you want to go somewhere tonight, that's your right. I just need to know you're safe. I'm safe, Elena said. I'm leaving. And Avery. Avery's with me. She's always with me. Avery came out of the kitchen doorway and went to her mother and stood beside her. And Elena looked down at her daughter, and Avery looked up at her mother, and Ronan watched that exchange and looked away. Because some moments aren't meant to be witnessed by more than the people in them. Cage picked up the duffel bag. Hollis took the backpack. Danny stepped slightly aside from the doorway. Not fully, just enough to technically constitute making room. And his face was doing the professional neutral thing again, the thing that meant this wasn't over, but this particular moment of it was ending. Ms. Boone, he said, you have my number if you need anything. I have it, she said. She walked past him. Avery walked past him. Ronan was last through the door, and as he stepped past Danny Kane onto the porch, Danny said quietly, not loud enough to carry to Elena, You know this isn't done. Ronan looked at him for a moment. Just looked at him, the way you look at something you want to see clearly so you can remember it accurately. I know, he said. He went down the porch steps into the cold. The night air hit him clean and hard after the close warmth of the house, and he breathed it in and held it for a second before letting it out. Behind him, he could hear Travis's voice starting up again inside, lower now, talking to his brother, the tone of a man debriefing, and he didn't try to hear the words because he didn't need the words. The vehicles were lined up on Sycamore Street. The bikes, and behind them, Danny Kane's patrol car with its lights off, just sitting there in the dark of the street like a reminder. Ronan walked to his bike and stood beside it and watched Elena come down the porch steps with her arms still across her ribs and her chin still level. Watched Cage load the duffel into the sidecar they sometimes used. Watched Avery climb back behind Shepard. Dart came up beside him. That was the opening move, Dart said. Yeah. Danny Kane's been at that department 6 years. Travis has been using him that whole time. How deep? Dart looked at him. How deep do you want it to be? Ronan didn't answer because the answer was that he didn't want it to be deep at all. But wanting things to be simple was not the same as them being simple, and he'd learned that lesson early and relearned it at regular intervals throughout his life. Get Hendricks on the phone when he's off shift, Ronan said. Not on the radio, off shift. Already planned on it. And find out what you can about Danny, not Travis. Danny. Dart nodded once. He went to his bike. The convoy pulled off Sycamore Street, and Ronan rode at the back and watched the patrol car in his mirror until it was out of sight, just sitting there under the dark sky with its lights off, not following, just sitting. And he thought about the difference between a threat you could see and a threat that was biding its time. They took Elena and Avery to Big Eddie's house that night. Not the Roost. The Roost was too visible, and Eddie had a 2-bedroom place 3 blocks off the main road that he used for situations exactly like this one. Situations that required somewhere safe and quiet that wasn't attached to the club's public address. Eddie was 58 and built like a fire plug and had once been the most feared man in 3 counties. And now he mostly fixed motorcycles and grew tomatoes and had a spare room with a lock on the door and a refrigerator he kept stocked because he had learned over years that people in crisis needed hot food and locked doors more than they needed almost anything else. His wife Marlene took one look at Elena's face and said nothing except kitchen, and Elena sat at Eddie's kitchen table at 11:30 at night, while Marlene made soup from a can and sliced bread and put it in front of her without ceremony, and Elena ate it in the careful way of someone whose body has been running on adrenaline and is now remembering that it's hungry. Avery fell asleep on the couch within 40 minutes. She fell asleep holding the handlebar of the blue bicycle, which Shepard had carried inside and propped against the couch beside her, and one of her hands found it in sleep the way hands find things you love, and she held it there and slept with the deep, unmoving sleep of total exhaustion. Ronan sat in Eddie's kitchen and drank coffee, black, too hot, the way he always drank it, burning his tongue slightly on each sip the way he had been doing since he was 22 and hadn't found a reason to change, and thought about Danny Kane. Deputy Danny Kane, 6 years on the Harlan County Force. Travis Kane's younger brother. A man who had shown up in under 10 minutes when his brother called, which meant either he was close to Sycamore Street when the call came in, or he had been waiting for a call. Neither option was comfortable. "You know anything about the father?" Ronan said. Shepard, sitting across the table, looked up. "Avery's father?" "Elena mentioned him, said he left when Avery was 5. "She say left, or—" "She said left." Ronan turned his coffee cup. "But she said it in the same voice she used for the word fell." Shepard was quiet for a moment. "So maybe he didn't leave." "Maybe," Ronan said. "Or maybe he left and there's more to why." He paused. "Either way, there's a 5-year gap between him leaving and Travis Kane arriving, and I want to know what's in that gap." "I'll look into it." "Not tonight." "No, not tonight." The kitchen was warm. The soup smell was still in the air. From the living room came the sound of Avery's breathing, slow, even, the complete unconsciousness of a child who has finally, after months, put down a weight. Ronan looked at his coffee. He thought about what Travis had said when he'd looked at Avery, the way his eyes had moved to her. He thought about the September night she'd described, calling the police, the officers leaving, Travis looking at her with that particular look. He thought about a child who had spent 2 months developing a contingency plan and then executed it on a Tuesday in November because she had run out of other options. He thought about his own daughter, and then he stopped thinking about her because there was nothing productive in that direction, only the 11-year-old fact of his failure. And there was work to do now, and the work was not about him. He finished the coffee. "I need to go to the Roost," he said. Shepard looked up again. "Tonight?" "There's something I need to pull out of the files, paper files." He stood. "Stay here. Both of you. Don't let anyone in who isn't Club." "Ronan." He stopped. Shepard had a look on his face that meant he was about to say something he'd been deciding whether to say. Shepard made decisions like that, took his time with them, arrived at them carefully, said them once. "Travis Kane is going to push back fast," Shepard said. "He's got a deputy in his pocket, and he's the kind of man who needs to win. He's going to push back, and he's going to push back hard, and he's going to do it in ways that are technically legal." "I know," Ronan said. "Which means we need to be clean. Everything we do from here, everything on record, everything visible, nothing that gives Danny Kane a reason to come back with actual authority." "I know, Shepard. I'm just saying it because I know." Ronan looked at him. "I've been doing this longer than you've been riding." A pause. Shepard nodded. It wasn't submission. It was acknowledgement, which was different, and Ronan appreciated the difference. He left Eddie's house and rode to the Roost. The parking lot was empty except for 2 bikes. The bar was locked. June had closed up after they'd left. But Ronan had a key, and had always had a key, and used it now, stepping into the dark bar with only the emergency light above the back exit, throwing a thin red-orange wash over the tables and the stools and the liquor bottles on the back shelf. He didn't turn on the main lights. He knew this room well enough to navigate it in the dark, and he was in the mood for the dark. He went to the back office. Small room, never quite warm enough, smelling of old paper and cigarette smoke from years past, and the particular scent of a space that has been important for a long time. He went to the filing cabinet in the corner, second drawer, the one that stuck, and he pulled it open and started going through the folders in the back. The Black Vultures had been watching Harlan County for a long time, not watching in any official sense, not keeping records of criminal activity or building cases, just watching the way people watch their home, noting the things that didn't sit right, keeping track in the informal, institutional, memory way that clubs keep track of things. Who causes problems? Who gets in trouble in ways that don't show up in the newspaper? Who has been hurting people quietly for a long time in a county that doesn't always see quiet hurt? He found the folder on the Kane family 20 minutes into looking. It wasn't a thick folder. A few pages, handwritten notes from 3 years ago when Brick's predecessor, a man named Ortega, who had left the club after a disagreement that was still a sore subject, had flagged Travis Kane's name in connection with a property dispute that had turned ugly. Nothing criminal, just a note. Travis Kane, 40, works at the Harlan Basin Quarry, has a temper and knows people who know people, Watch. And then, in different handwriting, added later, Brother Danny with the county sheriff's office. Keep eyes open. 3 years ago. Someone had flagged Travis Kane's name 3 years ago. Ronan sat back in the chair and looked at the folder and felt the particular tired anger of someone who is looking at a thing that should have been acted on sooner. He read the notes twice. He put the folder on the desk. He put his elbows on the desk and his face in his hands and breathed for a moment. Not guilt exactly. Something more complicated than guilt. A question that didn't have a comfortable answer, which was, at what point does watching become enabling? At what point does the knowledge you've accumulated become a responsibility you're not living up to? He didn't have an answer. He'd been turning that question over for years, for specific and personal reasons that lived in the part of him that kept his daughter's name, and he wasn't going to answer it tonight. He picked up his phone. He called Dart. The files have a note on Kane, he said when Dart picked up. 3 years old. Ortega flagged him. A pause. I remember. You remember. There was nothing actionable then, Dart said. He hadn't done anything that could be proven. You know how this works? I know how it works, Ronan said. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just noting it. Another pause. Dart's pauses were not uncomfortable. They were Dart processing something, deciding on the precise thing, saying the precise thing. What do you need from me tonight? I need you to start making calls in the morning. Elena is going to need to make a formal complaint. The emergency room visit is going to need to happen, and the records are going to need to be preserved. And I need to know who Travis Kane has been talking to at that quarry for the last 3 years. That last one might take a few days. Take the days. He hung up. He sat in the dark office for a while longer with the folder open on the desk, the handwritten notes visible in the thin red-orange light from the hallway. He thought about Avery sleeping on Eddie's couch with her hand on her bicycle. He thought about Elena's voice saying, I'm leaving, in a tone that had never been said before, that had cost something real to say, that could not be unsaid. He thought about Danny Kane in his patrol car sitting on Sycamore Street with his lights off. He thought about what Shepard had said. He's going to push back hard. He's going to do it in ways that are technically legal. He left the office and locked it and locked the bar and rode home in the November cold. He didn't sleep much. The morning came in gray and cold, the sky the particular flat color of eastern Kentucky November, that meant it was deciding whether to snow, and Ronan was at Eddie's house by 7:30 with 2 paper bags from the diner on Main, eggs, biscuits, coffee, in paper cups with plastic lids that were already slightly crushed from the ride. He knocked. Marlene let him in without ceremony. Avery was at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal, still in the clothes from the night before, looking at the tabletop with the unfocused attention of a child who is tired but has slept, which is different from the focused exhaustion of a child who hasn't. She looked up when he came in. Morning, he said. Morning, she said. He put the bags on the counter. Marlene took the coffee cups with the precision of a woman who understood what was necessary. Elena came out of the back room a minute later in the same jeans and sweater from the night before, her hair brushed but her eyes carrying the particular weight of a night spent in a strange bed thinking about everything. She looked at Ronan. Thank you, she said. It sounded like it had cost something. Don't, he said. I want to. Later. He pulled out a stool at the counter. Right now I need to talk to you about what happens today. She sat down. You need to go to the hospital, he said. I know. The ribs need to be imaged, and the records need to exist. Whatever treatment you need, I know, she said. I decided that last night. She paused. I've been deciding it for a while. I just needed... She stopped. Someone to decide with, he said. She looked at him. Something like that. Shepard's going to take you. He knows someone at ARH who'll see you without you waiting in the general intake. He looked at her directly. When they ask you what happened, you tell them. Everything, not the version you've been telling. Everything. Her jaw tightened. I understand. I'm not telling you it'll be easy. I've had nothing easy in 4 months, she said flatly. I know what it feels like. He held her gaze. I know you do. Avery from the table had been listening to this with the transparent listening of a child who has learned that adults conduct important conversations as though children can't hear. She was looking at her cereal, but her whole body was the posture of someone hearing every word. Ronan looked at her, and she looked up, and he didn't pretend he hadn't noticed. "Avery," he said, "you're going to need to stay with Marlene today." "I want to go with my mom." "I know you do. You're staying with Marlene." She looked at him with the dark, assessing eyes that he was already beginning to recognize as her resting expression. The expression of someone taking continuous measure of the reliability of the things in her world. "Are you going to be here when she gets back?" Avery said. He looked at her. "Someone will be here." "That's not what I asked." A long moment. He said, "I'll be here." Something in her face relaxed by approximately 1 millimeter, which on her face was a lot. She went back to her cereal. Shepard arrived at 8:15 and took Elena. Ronan stayed. Marlene produced more coffee without being asked. Eddie came down from upstairs in a flannel shirt and wool socks and sat across from Avery and started talking to her about breakfast foods, which she engaged with cautiously and then with increasing interest, because Eddie was the kind of man who had no difficulty talking to children as though they were people, a skill more rare than it should have been. Ronan sat in the corner of the kitchen and drank his third coffee of the morning and answered 3 texts from Dart. Hendricks called in. Not helpful. Says his hands are tied without a formal complaint on file. Told him there will be one by end of day. And then, word from someone at the quarry. Travis Kane didn't go in this morning. Called in a personal day. And then after a pause of several minutes, Danny Kane is on shift today. 8 to 4. He stared at the last text. Travis hadn't gone to work. Danny was on shift. Travis Kane did not take personal days. Dart had pulled his work record in less than 12 hours, and the man had taken 6 personal days in 3 years, always when he needed to handle something. A legal matter, a dispute, an arrangement. He took personal days when there was work to be done that was not the kind of work you did at a quarry. Ronan set down the coffee cup. He said quietly to Eddie, "Need you to watch Avery for a bit." Eddie looked at him over Avery's head. "Done," he said. Ronan went outside. The cold was sharp and clean, different from the night before, drier, with a wind coming off the hills that carried the smell of dead leaves and something that might become snow before the week was out. His bike was parked behind Eddie's truck, and he stood beside it without getting on it and called Dart. "Where's Travis now?" he said. "Don't know yet. Working on it." "He's not doing nothing," Ronan said. "Men like Travis Kane don't take personal days to sit at home and think. He might be with a lawyer." "Could be." Ronan turned that over. "Could be. If he's got documentation or he's planning to build a case." "What kind of case does he build?" Dart said. Elena left voluntarily. "We didn't touch him. Danny came in and nothing happened." "He doesn't need a real case," Ronan said. "He needs a reason. He needs to manufacture enough noise to get Elena painted as unstable and Avery painted as—" He stopped. Dart was quiet on the other end. "He's going to go after custody," Ronan said. It landed as he said it, like something he'd been turning toward without quite seeing. He's not Elena's husband. He's not Avery's father. He has no legal claim to either of them. But if he can manufacture a crisis, create a reason for DCF to take a look, Dart said. An anonymous tip, a concerned party reporting that Elena left her home in an unstable emotional state in the company of— He let it finish itself. "Motorcycle club members," Dart said. The wind moved through the yard. Somewhere nearby, a crow was making its flat, repetitive sound against the gray sky. "How fast can that move?" Ronan said. "DCF call? If someone knows who to call?" A pause. "Could be today." Ronan thought about Avery inside at the kitchen table, thought about what today could mean. "I need to find out where Travis Kane is," he said. "Right now." He hung up. He went back inside. The morning moved forward in the particular way of mornings when you're waiting for something you can feel coming but can't yet see. Eddie kept Avery occupied, had gotten out a deck of cards at some point, was teaching her something complicated with multiple rules, and she was engaged with the cards the way she engaged with everything, with precise and particular attention. Ronan sat at the table and watched his phone and drank coffee he was no longer tasting and thought. At 10:47, Shepard texted, "At ARH. Elena's in imaging. It's bad. 3 ribs, one of them displaced. Doctor already talking to someone." At 11:03, Dart texted, "Found Travis. He's at the county building. Courthouse Annex, 3rd floor, Family Court Services." Ronan stared at the screen. Family Court Services. Not a lawyer's office, not a private meeting. The county building, which meant paper trail, which meant official record. He was already moving. Not an anonymous tip. He was doing it formally, faster than Ronan had expected, faster than anyone had expected, because men like Travis Kane sometimes surprised you with the speed of their administrative ruthlessness when they felt their control slipping. He stood up. Avery looked up from the cards. "You have to go," she said. It wasn't a question. For a bit. He looked at her steadily. "Eddie's here. Nobody comes in this house unless you know them." "What's happening?" she said. He looked at her face, the dark, precise eyes. 10 years old, and she had been keeping track of more than he'd known about for longer than she should have had to. He considered lying to her. He did not lie to her. "Travis is trying to make a legal problem," he said. "I'm going to go make sure it doesn't become one." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said carefully, "He does that. When he thinks he's losing, he does paperwork." She said the word paperwork the way adults say it, with the particular contempt of someone who understands that bureaucracy can be weaponized. He talked about it once, when my mom said she was going to leave. He said she couldn't take me anywhere because he'd file papers. Ronan went still. "He's not your father," he said. "I know." She paused. "He said he was going to say he was." Ronan looked at her. "He talked about it when he thought I was asleep," she said. "He said he had documents, that he could file things that would say he had parental interest in me because he'd been my—" She stopped. "Because he'd been present in my life. He said my mom couldn't stop it." The word document sat in the air between them. Forged documents. Or falsified. Something manufactured that was designed to look legitimate, because Travis Kane was a man who understood how systems worked and had spent 4 months in a household studying the vulnerabilities of the people in it. He knew Avery's name, he knew her school, he knew her history. He had been present, technically, and presence could be framed, and in family court the framing mattered as much as the fact. "How long ago did you hear him say that?" Ronan said. "October," she said. "He was on the phone." "With who?" She shook her head. "I don't know." Ronan looked at Eddie. Eddie was watching him with the expression of a man who understood exactly what was happening and was waiting to be told what he could do about it. "Stay here," Ronan said to Avery. "I mean it." "I know you mean it," she said. He went out to his bike and called Dart and told him what Avery had heard. Dart was quiet for a moment. Then, "Documents in October means he's been planning this since at least October, before Elena made any move to leave." "Before Elena made any move," Ronan said, "meaning he was preparing to do this regardless, whether she stayed or went." "He was going to use it eventually," Dart said, "as a leash." The words sat in the cold air. "Who does the vultures know in the county clerk's office?" Ronan said. "There's nobody in the clerk's office," Dart said, "but there's a woman named Flores in the family court intake who has a history with Travis Kane's name. Not good history. Get her on the phone. Not officially. Just, I'll handle it." He rode to the courthouse. He didn't go inside. There was no useful reason for a Black Vultures president to walk into the Harlan County Courthouse Annex on a Wednesday morning, and the useful reasons were not the kinds of things that survived exposure. He parked on the street and sat on his bike and watched the building, and thought about what was happening inside it, and thought about what it meant that Travis Kane had moved this fast. Fast was scared. Fast was a man who felt his control slipping and was running toward the nearest mechanism of reinstatement he could access. Fast meant the formal complaint Elena would file this afternoon, if she hadn't already become unavailable for it. His phone rang. He didn't recognize the number but answered it. "Mr. Creed," a woman's voice said. Professional, clipped, not unfriendly, but not warm. "Who is this?" "My name is Pauline Voss. I'm an attorney. I have been retained by a client named Travis Kane regarding the matter of—" "Don't," Ronan said. A pause. "Excuse me. Whatever you're about to read to me from whatever filing your client has prepared," Ronan said, "save it for someone who's going to be impressed by it." He paused. "What does he want?" A longer pause. He could hear her recalibrating. My client is seeking emergency protective custody documentation regarding a minor named Avery Boone, on the grounds that she was removed from her primary residence last night, in circumstances that— Elena Boone is Avery Boone's mother, Ronan said. The child went with her mother. Those are not circumstances that require a response from Travis Kane. My client believes— I don't care what your client believes, Ronan said, but I want you to hear something clearly. Elena Boone is at Appalachian Regional Hospital, right now being treated for 3 fractured ribs and additional injuries sustained over the course of 4 months. There is a physician on record. There will be photographs. There will be a formal complaint filed with the Harlan County Sheriff's Office this afternoon. Your client knows this. That's why he called you this morning. He let that land. So whatever paperwork he's prepared, whatever documents he's manufactured, and I want you to hear the word manufactured, this is not the story he told you. Silence on the line. Mr. Creed, you seem like a person with a law license they want to keep, Ronan said. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what exists. The documentation exists. The medical record exists. The history exists. He paused. Have a good morning. He hung up. He sat on the bike for a moment with the phone in his hand and the cold air around him and the gray Kentucky sky above, and he breathed once, slowly, all the way in and all the way out. His phone buzzed. Dart. Flores says a filing came in 40 minutes ago. Emergency custody application, signed by Travis Kane. She flagged it as potentially disputed and put it in the slow queue, but it exists. He's got a judge he golfs with. Ronan stared at the screen. A judge. He hadn't expected a judge. He should have. Men like Travis Kane didn't operate without infrastructure. They built it over years, quietly, knowing the day would come when they needed it, maintaining relationships that looked like golf games and county dinners and normal civic life, and were something else entirely. He called Shepard. How's Elena? He said when Shepard picked up. She's done with imaging. Doctor's talking to her now. Ronan, I know about the ribs. There's more than the ribs. Shepard's voice had changed, gotten quieter. The doctor found it's not just the last incident. There are healed fractures, old ones, things that— He stopped. Ronan closed his eyes. Things that mean this has been going on longer than 4 months, Shepard said. The cold air, the gray sky, the crow somewhere, still making its flat sound. Is she okay? Ronan said. She's holding it together. But Ronan, the doctor wants to call it. They want to file the mandatory report right now, today, before— Tell them yes, Ronan said. Tell them to file it. Tell them to file everything. That's what I thought, Shepard said. Elena is— A pause. She's scared. The mandatory report means it becomes official, and she's scared of what Travis does when things become official. Tell her what Travis is doing right now, Ronan said. A pause. Tell her, Ronan said. She needs to know what she's deciding against. He could hear Shepard breathing on the other end. Then, okay. He hung up. He sat on his bike on the street outside the Harlan County Courthouse Annex and thought about all the things that were moving simultaneously. Elena in the hospital, Avery at Eddie's house with a deck of cards, Travis Kane and his attorney and his filing and his judge who played golf, Danny Kane on shift until 4, and somewhere in all of that, the handwritten note in the files, watch. He thought about the night before, the headlights coming slow down Sycamore Street, the way Danny Kane had smiled from the porch doorway. He thought about Avery's face when she'd said, he said he had documents. He thought about a girl who had spent 2 months building a contingency plan for the night. Things became unbearable. And then his phone buzzed again. Not a text. A call. Eddie's number. He answered. Eddie? Ronan. Eddie's voice was flat and careful in the way it got when something needed saying clearly. Car just came down the street, slow, didn't stop, but it was a county vehicle. Ronan's blood went cold. Plates, he said. Couldn't get them all. First 3 were HCG. Harlan County Government. Is Avery? She's here. She's right here. But Ronan? A pause. She's looking out the window, and I can't get her away from it. Ronan was already starting the engine. "Lock the door," he said. "Don't let anyone in. I'm 3 minutes out." "Ronan?" Eddie's voice again, and this time there was something in it that made Ronan's grip tighten on the phone before he registered why. "She figured out what's happening. I don't know how. But she figured it out." Ronan pulled out into the street. "She's asking if they're going to take her," Eddie said. The engine opened up on the cold county road, the sound of it filling the November air, and Ronan rode hard through the gray morning with the wind in his face and his jaw set and the phone pressed to his ear and the feeling in his chest of something that had been terrible becoming something worse. The feeling of a situation that had passed the point where being careful was enough, where being clean was enough, where watching and waiting and doing things right was enough. Because somewhere between the courthouse annex and Eddie Morrow's locked house on the side street, the story had changed. This was no longer about getting Elena out of a bad situation. This was about whether they could keep Avery from being used as a weapon against her mother. And the county vehicle that had just come slow down Eddie's street wasn't looking for a parking space. "Tell her no," Ronan said. "What?" "Tell Avery. Tell her nobody is taking her." He opened up the throttle. "Tell her I said so." He rode, and somewhere behind him, in the courthouse annex, a man with forged documents and a judge who played golf was signing his name to the worst decision he would ever make, because he had not yet understood what was coming for him, and by the time he did, it would be too late to put the papers back in the drawer. He made it in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. He knew, because he counted, not deliberately, not in the way you count when you're trying to manage something, but in the involuntary way the brain marks time when the body is running on something cleaner and colder than adrenaline. The county road to Eddie's street. The turn. The houses sliding past. 2 minutes and 40 seconds from the courthouse annex to the curb outside Eddie Morrow's house. And when he killed the engine and swung off the bike in one motion, the county vehicle was gone. No, not gone. Parked. Half a block down, against the curb, engine off, sitting in the gray November morning like it had always been there. A white Ford with the county seal on the door, and a woman in the passenger seat writing something on a clipboard, and a man behind the wheel talking on a phone. Ronan stood on the sidewalk and looked at the vehicle for 3 full seconds. Then he went inside. Eddie had the door open before he reached the porch. Avery was behind him, not hiding, not cowering, standing in the middle of Eddie's living room with her arms at her sides, and her chin level, and her face doing the thing it did when she was managing something that was bigger than she wanted it to be. The blue bicycle was still propped against the couch. She was looking at Ronan with eyes that were asking a question she had already partially answered for herself. "The car outside," she said. "I see it. They're from the county. Probably. Travis called them." Not a question. He held her gaze. "Most likely." Her jaw tightened. 1 degree. 2. "Are they going to come in?" "Not today," he said. "How do you know?" He looked at her. She was 10 years old and she deserved a real answer, and he gave her one. Because they're observing right now, building a record. They need a court order to enter a private residence, and they don't have one yet. He paused. Yet. The word landed between them, and she absorbed it without flinching, which told him everything about how much of the world this child had already absorbed. "Ronan," Eddie said from the doorway. His voice was low. Ronan looked at him. Eddie tipped his head toward the kitchen, one small gesture. Ronan looked at Avery. "Stay here. Don't go near the front window." She nodded. She sat down on the couch next to the bicycle and put her hand on the handlebar and looked at the wall. Ronan followed Eddie into the kitchen. Eddie closed the door behind them. Not all the way, just most of the way. The careful gap of a man who understood that a child needed to know she wasn't being shut out, even when the conversation wasn't for her. "There's more," Eddie said. Ronan waited. "Dart called while you were riding over. Couldn't reach you." Eddie put both hands flat on the kitchen counter, the posture of a man preparing to say something he'd rather not. "The filing Travis made this morning. It's not just the emergency custody application." "What else?" "There's an affidavit attached." Eddie looked at him steadily. "From a witness, saying they observed you and the club removing Avery from the residence last night against Elena's wishes, saying Elena was distressed and appeared to be under duress from the club." The kitchen was very quiet. Ronan looked at the countertop, at the coffee cups from the morning still in the drying rack, at the bowl Avery had used for her cereal, rinsed and upside down. Witness, he said. A neighbor. Someone on Sycamore Street. Which neighbor? House across the street. Name of Briggs. Ronan ran it. He thought about the street, the dark, the bikes pulling up, the lights that were on and the lights that weren't, the windows with curtains open and the windows with curtains drawn. He thought about whether he had been careful, and he thought yes, they had been careful. Quiet engines, no confrontation, minimal time. But careful was not the same as invisible, and they had never been invisible, and a man who needed a witness could find one. Is it true? He said. Eddie looked at him. Any part of it, Ronan said. Was Elena distressed? Did she look like she was Did she look like she was being pressured? She walked out of that house on her own 2 feet, Eddie said flatly. Marlene will say so. I'll say so. Shepard'll say so. That's not what I'm asking. Ronan looked at him. I'm asking, is there anything in that affidavit that a judge who golfs with Travis Kane is going to be able to use? Any ambiguity, any moment that could be framed? Eddie's silence was 3 seconds long. She hesitated, he said finally. On the porch. Before she agreed to go, she hesitated. Ronan breathed out slowly through his nose. How long? Maybe 10 seconds. 10 seconds. 10 seconds of a frightened woman standing on her own porch in the cold, deciding whether to trust the men in front of her, which was a completely rational and human thing to do, and which, in the hands of a motivated attorney with an affidavit and a cooperative judge, could be framed as uncertainty, as reluctance, as the look of someone who was not entirely free in her decision. He put his hand on the counter. His phone buzzed. Dart. Shepard says Elena is ready to file the complaint. But Ronan, there's something else. Call me. He called him. Talk, he said when Dart picked up. The doctor at ARH, Dart said, the one treating Elena. He pulled her records. Not just from last night, her full history at that hospital. A pause. She's been treated there before, twice in the last 3 years. Before Travis. Ronan frowned. Before Travis. Before Travis Kane moved in. 2021 and 2022. Both times she listed the cause as accidental. Both times the attending noted the injuries were inconsistent with the stated cause. Another pause. Longer. Ronan. The old fractures the doctor found this morning, some of them predate Travis by at least 2 years. The kitchen, the quiet, the sound of Avery moving slightly on the couch in the other room. Someone else, Ronan said. Someone else. He turned this over. Elena didn't mention anyone before Travis. No, Dart said. She didn't. Does Shepard know? He's the one who called me. He's with Elena now. She doesn't know he knows. A pause. He says she seems like she doesn't know the records exist, like she thought they were gone. Ronan's mind was moving fast and cold, the way it moved when multiple things were converging on a point he hadn't expected to reach. Before Travis. Someone before Travis, someone who had hurt her badly enough to leave fractures that showed up on an imaging report 3 years later. Someone she hadn't mentioned, someone whose existence she might have had reasons to conceal. The father, Ronan said. Dart was quiet. Avery's father, Ronan said. Coulter Wynn. She said he left when Avery was 5. Avery's 10, 5 years ago. He ran the dates. The first hospital record, 2021, Avery would have been 4, almost 5. Yeah, Dart said. Find Coulter Wynn, Ronan said. Already started. Dart paused. Ronan, there's one more thing. The tone of it stopped him. The affidavit, Dart said. The witness. Briggs. On Sycamore Street. Yeah. I know that name. Silence. From where? Ronan said. From the Kane family file, Dart said. 3 years ago. When Ortega was watching Travis, one of the names in his notes, someone Travis was known to socialize with on Sycamore Street. A beat. Briggs has been Travis's neighbor for 6 years. They drink together. Ronan, the witness, isn't a neighbor who happened to see something. He's been in Travis Kane's pocket the whole time. The thing that happened in Ronan's chest was not anger. It was colder than anger. The recognition of a system, not just a man. The recognition that what they were looking at was not an abuser who had gotten lucky with a cooperative brother and a convenient neighbor, but something more deliberately constructed, something that had been assembled over years the way you assemble infrastructure, patiently, with an eye toward the day when you'd need it. He built this, Ronan said. Before Elena, Dart said. Before Avery. He built the network before he moved in. The brother, the neighbor, the judge. Ronan, Travis Kane identified Elena Boone as a target and spent time setting up the apparatus before he ever put his hands on her. Ronan stood in Eddie's kitchen and felt the full weight of what Dart had just said settle into him. A woman had been selected, studied. Her vulnerabilities had been mapped. Single mother, history of abuse she was ashamed of, limited social support, a daughter who was her only real anchor. An infrastructure had been assembled around her over years before the first move was made. And when the structure finally closed around her, it closed with a deputy brother, a bought neighbor, a judge, an attorney, and now that she had tried to leave, a filing that could take her daughter. "Shepard," Ronan said. "Yeah." "Tell him not to let Elena out of that hospital until I get there." He hung up. He came out of the kitchen. Avery was still on the couch, still with her hand on the bicycle handlebar, but she had turned slightly toward the kitchen doorway. And when he came through, she looked at him, and he looked at her, and he sat down in the chair across from her and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Okay." "Before Travis," he said, "your mom, was there anyone before Travis? Someone who was around when you were little, who might have hurt her?" Avery looked at him. She looked at him for a long time, long enough that the question settled into the room and became part of it. Her hand was very still on the bicycle handlebar. Her face was doing nothing he could read. "I was 4, she said finally. "I know. I don't remember things clearly from when I was 4. I know that too. But," she said and stopped. He waited. "There was a man," she said. "My mom called him a friend. He was around for a while, and then he wasn't." She paused. "I remember my mom had a cast on her arm. She said she fell. I was 4 and I believed her." She looked at her hand on the handlebar. "I don't believe things the same way anymore." "No," Ronan said. "You don't." "Is this important," she said, "for what's happening with Travis?" "It might be." She looked at him directly. "Is my mom in trouble?" "Your mom is at the hospital. Shepard is with her." "That's not what I asked." He held her gaze. "I'm going to fix it," he said. "That's also not what I asked." A long silence. "Yes," he said. "She's in trouble. And I'm going to fix it." Something moved across her face. Not relief, not fear. Something between them, something more honest than either. She nodded once, the same small formal nod she'd given him at the bar the night before when she'd first agreed to something. He stood up. "Eddie doesn't leave this house," he said. "Dart's sending Brick and Hollis to park on this street. If the county vehicle moves toward the front door, you call me. Not Eddie. You." He looked at her. "Can you do that?" "Yes," she said. He went to the hospital. The cold had gotten serious while he'd been inside. A real cold now, not just November, but a winter cold. The sky pressing down flat and gray, and the wind with a bite that hadn't been there at 7 this morning. He rode with his jaw set and his eyes on the road, and his mind turning everything Dart had told him over and over, looking for the edges, looking for the place where the thing was weakest. Infrastructure. Travis had built infrastructure. The question was how deep it went and how much of it was visible, and how much of it was the kind of thing that only became visible when you already knew what you were looking for. He found Shepard in the corridor outside Elena's room, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, his face carrying the particular expression of a man who has heard something that has reorganized his understanding of a situation. "She knows you know," Ronan said. "Yeah," Shepard said. "I didn't try to hide it." "How is she?" Shepard looked at him. "How do you think?" Does she want to talk to me? I don't know. Yeah, she will. Shepard paused. She's embarrassed, Ronan. About the records. About the fact that they exist, and she thought they were... She said she thought they'd been purged somehow, that it had been long enough that they wouldn't... She was protecting herself, Ronan said. She was protecting herself from herself, Shepard said, from having to... He stopped. She didn't tell Travis about the history. She thought if she kept it hidden, he'd never have a way to use it, but she also didn't tell us. And now Travis knows. Shepard looked at him sharply. How would Travis... The attorney, Ronan said. Pauline Voss called me this morning. She didn't just have the custody application. She had details, things about Elena's background, about her history of instability, the specific phrasing. Someone gave her information about Elena's past that you'd only have if you'd done a deep search, a professional search. Travis has been building this file on Elena for... He stopped. For years. Possibly. Possibly before he moved in, before he even introduced himself on the porch of that duplex, he had been building a file. Elena had been in that room the whole time he'd been in the corridor, and he hadn't gone in yet, and he needed to go in. He pushed the door open. She was sitting up in the hospital bed with the adjustable back raised and a thin blanket across her legs and her left arm connected to a monitor by a clip on her finger. She had a bruise across her cheekbone that was spectacular in the flat hospital light, the full purple-yellow range of something 2 days developed. And she had 3 ribs wrapped, and there were other things the imaging had shown that he was not going to look at her face and think about right now. She was looking at the window when he came in, and she didn't look at him immediately, and he understood that she was preparing herself. You know, she said, still looking at the window. Yeah. About before Travis. Yeah. She turned then, looked at him. Her face was tired and controlled, and underneath the control was something raw that she wasn't trying very hard to hide, which told him she was beyond the part where hiding felt like it was worth the energy. I was 24, she said. His name was Garrett. He was... It doesn't matter what he was. It was a year, maybe a little more. I left when Avery was 5 because he started... She stopped. Because she started to notice things, and I decided that was the line. Did he follow you? For a while. Then he stopped. She looked at her hands. I thought I was done with it. I thought I'd gotten out clean enough that it was just gone. A thing that happened and was finished. The hospital records, Ronan said. I didn't know they still had them. I thought... She pressed her lips together. I was naive. You weren't naive, he said. You were surviving. She looked at him. There's a difference, he said. A long silence. The monitor beeped softly. Down the corridor, someone was being paged. Travis knows, she said. Not a question. His attorney has information about your history. Yes. Her eyes closed for a moment. When they opened, they were the eyes of someone who has just had a fear confirmed that they have been managing for months. He found Garrett. Possibly. He was looking. Before... I noticed things last spring before he moved in. Things out of place. My laptop had been accessed. I thought I was being paranoid. Her voice was flat. I wasn't being paranoid. No, Ronan said. You weren't. He's going to use Garrett in the custody filing, she said. He's going to say I have a pattern of... that I'm unstable. That I have a history of putting Avery in situations... She stopped. Her jaw tightened hard. Avery has never been in danger from me. Ever. Whatever mistakes I've made, she has never... I know that, Ronan said. You haven't known me 48 hours. I know it, he said again. She looked at him. Whatever she was looking for, she seemed to find enough of it to continue. What do I do? She said. You file the complaint today, he said. The mandatory report is going in regardless. The doctor's already moving on it. You add your formal complaint on top of that. You get ahead of the filing Travis made this morning with your own version of what happened last night, on record, today. And Garrett, I need you to tell me where Garrett is. She looked at him. If Travis found him, Ronan said, he might be part of the infrastructure. He might have given Travis information voluntarily, or Travis might have used something to compel it. Either way, I need to know if Garrett, whoever he is a threat or just a ghost. A pause. Garrett Mills, she said quietly. Last I knew, he was in Corbin. That was 5 years ago. He wrote it in his phone. Is there anyone else? He said. Anyone else who might have information about your history that could be used? Anyone Travis might have talked to, old friends, family. My family doesn't... She stopped, started again. My mother died in 2019. I don't have siblings. My father is in Lexington, and we don't speak. A pause. There's a woman I used to work with, Tammy. Travis met her once at a... We ran into her at the grocery store. He talked to her for a long time, more than made sense. She looked at the window again. I thought he was just being friendly. What's Tammy's last name? Aldrich. She works at the county assessor's office. He stopped writing. County assessor's office. He looked up from his phone slowly. Tammy Aldrich, he said. How long have you known her? 10 years. We worked together at the school board office before I switched to the pharmacy. She frowned slightly at his expression. Why? He was thinking about the county building, about Travis being at the courthouse annex this morning, specifically the family court services office, which was on the 3rd floor, about the judge who played golf, about the county infrastructure that Travis had assembled over years. The county assessor's office was on the 3rd floor of the courthouse annex, same floor. Did Tammy ever mention knowing Travis before you introduced them? He said. Elena went very still. She said she'd heard his name, she said slowly. Around the county offices. She said people knew him from the quarry contracts. Her voice was changing as she spoke, getting quieter, getting more careful, the voice of someone following a thought that was going somewhere she hadn't wanted to go. Ronan, tell me. The first time Travis asked me out, she said. He came into the pharmacy. He said he'd been told it was where I worked. She stopped. I never asked him who told him. I just assumed I don't know. I assumed he'd found out somehow. She was looking at him now. Tammy knew where I worked. He put the phone in his pocket. He looked at Elena Boone in her hospital bed, 3 cracked ribs and old healed fractures and a bruise across her cheek, and he understood what he was looking at now with a clarity that was both clean and terrible. He understood that the thing they had walked into last night on Sycamore Street was not a simple situation of a man controlling a woman. It was a campaign, a deliberate, years-long, carefully constructed campaign, and it had started before Travis Kane ever walked into that pharmacy, and it had started with someone Elena trusted. Tammy introduced you to Travis, he said. Elena's face went the color of the hospital wall. No, she said. No, she wasn't there. They met accidentally. I ran into... She stopped. He waited. She suggested that pharmacy, Elena said. That branch. When I was looking for a new job, she said it was a good place, easy hours. Her voice had gone almost inaudible. That was 3 years ago. 3 years. Travis Kane had been identified in the club's files 3 years ago. The connection to Tammy Aldrich, who worked in the county offices where Travis had connections, who had directed Elena to the pharmacy where Travis had conveniently discovered her. 3 years of infrastructure. 3 years of a woman being quietly moved into position. He knew about Garrett before he met you, Ronan said. She closed her eyes. He targeted you specifically because of Garrett, Ronan said, because you had a history you were ashamed of and trying to hide, which meant you wouldn't run to authorities, which meant you were isolated, which meant when he finally had what he needed, he could close the trap and you'd have nowhere to go. She didn't say anything. He could hear her breathing, controlled, deliberate, the breathing of someone who is refusing to come apart in a hospital bed and is succeeding through pure will. Elena. She opened her eyes. This is not your fault, he said. She looked at him. None of it, he said. Not Garrett, not Travis, not any of the pieces in between. You were selected by a predatory man with the patience and resources to plan this over years, and you survived it, and you got yourself and your daughter out, and everything that comes next is going to be about what he built, not about you. He held her gaze. Do you understand me? A long silence. "I understand you," she said. It came out rough. He stood up. "I'm going to need you to be very steady for the next few hours," he said. "The complaint, the statement, everything on record. Can you do that?" "Yes," she said. He left the room. In the corridor, Shepard was still against the wall. "Tammy Aldrich," Ronan said. "County Assessor's Office. I need everything." Shepard looked at him. "How bad is this?" "I don't know yet." Ronan's jaw was set. "But it's bigger than one man." His phone rang. Dart. He answered immediately. "What?" "Coulter Wynn," Dart said. "I found him." Something in Dart's voice. Ronan caught it. "Where?" he said. That's the thing. A pause that was not Dart's normal pause. This one had something in it. Something that Dart, who processed things before speaking, had not fully processed yet. "He's not in the county. He's not in the state." Another pause. "Ronan, Coulter Wynn has been in a federal correctional facility in Manchester, Kentucky for the last 4 years. Sentenced in 2021, 18 months served, released 2022, then violated parole and went back in." A beat. "The parole violation." "What was the charge on the violation?" Ronan said. "Prohibited contact," Dart said, "with Elena Boone." The corridor. The flat hospital light. Somewhere down the hall, a cart was being wheeled across linoleum. "He was trying to contact her," Ronan said, repeatedly. "Letters, from inside. The parole board has records of 6 letters that were returned unopened." Dart's voice was careful. "Ronan, the return address on those letters. Someone filed a notification with the parole board saying Elena Boone had requested no contact. Signed her name." "She didn't sign it," Ronan said. "I don't think she ever saw those letters," Dart said. "Coulter Wynn, Avery's father, who Elena said had left, who had been trying to contact her from inside a federal facility, trying repeatedly, enough that someone had intervened, someone had filed paperwork in her name, someone had made sure those letters never arrived. And the original charge, before the parole violation, before the contact attempts, the charge that had put him inside in the first place." "What was the original charge?" Ronan said. He already knew it wasn't going to be simple. "Aggravated assault," Dart said. 2021. The victim was a man named... A pause. "Garrett Mills." The corridor went very quiet around Ronan. Coulter Wynn had assaulted Garrett Mills in 2021, the man who had hurt Elena, who had left fractures on her bones that showed up on imaging reports 3 years later. Avery's father had found out, somehow, from somewhere, and had gone after the man who hurt his family, and it had put him inside. And while he was inside, someone had intercepted the letters he sent home, and by the time he got out and violated parole trying to reach Elena, it was already too late, because Travis Kane was already in position. "Travis knew about Coulter," Ronan said. It wasn't a question. "Has to," Dart said. "If Tammy Aldrich was feeding him information about Elena, she would have known about Coulter. Elena would have mentioned him to Tammy. They were friends for 10 years. A pause. "Ronan, Coulter Wynn is the reason Elena never went to the authorities about Travis." He stopped. "She thinks Coulter left her," Dart said. "She thinks he abandoned them. She doesn't know about the letters. She doesn't know what he did to Garrett, or why. She just knows that the man she thought she could rely on disappeared, and then another man appeared who was very good at being reliable until he wasn't." A pause. "She's been alone this whole time thinking she was abandoned. That's what Travis was counting on. That's the foundation the whole thing was built on." Ronan stood in the hospital corridor with his phone against his ear and the weight of what Dart had just laid out pressing down on him from every direction. And he thought about Elena in that room 3 doors down telling him she understood, and then thought about what she didn't understand, what she had never understood, what had been taken from her understanding with deliberate and calculated theft. He thought about a man in a federal facility writing letters that never arrived. He thought about Avery, 10 years old, asking him, "Are they going to take me from Eddie Morrow's living room?" He thought about Travis Kane in the courthouse annex filing papers with a judge who played golf. And somewhere in that filing, somewhere in the carefully assembled documentation that Pauline Voss would present, was the story Travis had constructed. An unstable woman, a history of poor decisions, a daughter who had been removed from her home by a motorcycle club, a man who only wanted to protect a child. It was a good story. It was a tight story. And it had been 3 years in the making. "I need Coulter Wynn's contact information," Ronan said. "He's still inside, second stint, but he's at the minimum security annex now, see McKee facility." A pause. "Ronan, visitation requests have to go through. I know how it works. It could take days." "Get it started today," he thought. And DART, the letters, the intercepted letters. If the parole board has records of the notification filed in Elena's name, that's a document. That document exists in a government filing system. If it was filed fraudulently, if someone forged Elena's name, that's a federal offense, Dart said quietly. "Get me the documentation." He hung up. He stood in the corridor for a moment, just a moment, breathing in and out in the flat hospital air, the smell of antiseptic and floor polish, and something floral from a cart near the nurse's station. He was aware of his own heartbeat, steady, not fast, the unhurried pace of a man who had learned long ago that panic was a luxury, and he had never been able to afford luxuries. He went back into Elena's room. She looked up. He sat in the chair beside the bed. He looked at her, and she looked at him, and he thought about the right way to say what he needed to say, and concluded there wasn't one. "I need to tell you something about Coulter," he said. Her face changed immediately. The particular change of hearing a name you have buried, a name that means something complicated and painful that you've spent years deciding how to carry. "He didn't leave," Ronan said. She stared at him. He told her. He told her about the assault charge, about Garrett Mills, about the federal facility and the letters, and the forged notification and the parole violation. He told her all of it in plain language with no softening because she had spent 4 months, years, living in a structure of lies, and she did not need another person deciding what she was ready to hear. He watched her face move through it. She did not cry. She sat in the hospital bed with her fractured ribs and her bruised face, and she listened to the entire thing, and her face moved through it. Through shock, and then something rawer than shock, and then something that was grief and fury and relief all compressed into an expression that had no name. And when he was done, she looked at the window for a long time. "He went after Garrett," she said. Her voice was barely a voice. "Yes. For me. Yes." And Travis knew. Not a question. Travis knew the whole time. Yes. Her hands were in her lap, very still. She looked at them. She looked at them for a long time, and then she said, in a voice that was steady and cold and nothing like the careful managed voice she'd been using for months, "I want to file everything, everything you need, right now, today. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what comes out." She looked at him. "I want him to go to prison." "Then that's what we're going to do," Ronan said. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, Eddie's number. He answered, and Eddie's voice came through with a tightness that made every nerve in Ronan's body go cold. The county vehicle moved. "It's not on the street anymore." A pause. 1 second. "There's a woman at my door right now. She's got a badge. Ronan, she's asking for Avery." He was moving before Eddie finished the sentence. Down the corridor, past the nurse's station, through the double doors and into the stairwell, because the elevator was too slow and too closed and too much like waiting. He took the stairs 2 at a time with the phone still at his ear and Eddie's voice coming through tight and controlled. "She's showing identification, says she's from DCF, says she has a wellness check order." "Don't open the door," Ronan said. "I haven't." "Does she have a police escort?" A pause. "No, she came alone." He hit the ground floor and pushed through to the parking lot, and the cold air came in hard. "She can't take Avery without a court order and a law enforcement escort. Not legally. Tell her that through the door. Don't open it." He was on the bike before Eddie responded. The engine came up loud and immediate, and he pulled out of the hospital lot hard, the rear tire finding traction on the cold asphalt by instinct, and he called Dart one-handed at the first red light. "I know," Dart said when he picked up. "Brick called me 2 minutes ago. He's on Eddy Street. The DCF woman, her name is Carla Webb. She's legitimate. She actually works for the county, But the wellness check order she's carrying is signed by Judge Harmon. A pause. The judge who golfs. The light changed. Ronan opened it up. That order is garbage, he said. It's built on Travis's affidavit, which is built on a bought witness. If Elena's formal complaint is on file, it's not on file yet, Dart said. Shepard is still at the hospital getting the paperwork processed. The mandatory report is in, but the formal complaint is 40 minutes behind it. Another pause, shorter. Ronan, Carla Webb is not the problem. She's doing her job. The order is the problem, and right now the order is valid on paper. 40 minutes. He had 40 minutes of legal gap between Travis Kane's manufactured paperwork and the real record that would dismantle it, and someone had timed that gap deliberately, and in that gap stood a county worker on Eddie Morrow's porch with a court order and Avery Boone on the other side of the door. He called Shepard. How fast can you get the complaint filed? I'm literally standing at the window waiting for faster. Ronan, Shepard. His voice came out harder than he meant it to. Faster. He heard Shepard moving, heard him talking to someone, quick and low, the sound of a man applying pressure to a bureaucratic process that was not designed to be pressured. 15 minutes, Shepard said. Maybe 12. He hung up. 3 minutes to Eddie's street. Brick's bike was parked at the corner, Brick standing beside it with his arms crossed and his face set, and Ronan pulled up hard behind him and was off the bike in one motion. She's still at the door, Brick said. She's been on the phone. Who's she calling? I don't know, but she made 2 calls in the last 5 minutes. Ronan looked at the house. Front door still closed. Curtains drawn the way he'd told Avery to draw them. The county vehicle parked at the curb, white and bureaucratically bland, a clipboard visible on the passenger seat. He walked to the door. He knocked the way he always knocked, 3 times, specific, unhurried. Eddie's voice came through the door. Ronan? Yeah. The door opened. Ronan stepped inside and registered the room in one pass. Eddie, solid and set-jawed near the door. Avery on the couch, upright, both hands on the bicycle handlebar, her face completely still. The county worker. Carla Webb, mid-40s, gray blazer, lanyard with her ID badge. The look of a woman who had been doing a difficult job for a long time and was trying to do it correctly in an incorrect situation, was still on the porch, and when Ronan turned and looked at her through the open doorway, she looked back at him with professional caution. Mr. she started. Creed, he said. Ronan Creed. I'm a friend of the family. Mr. Creed, I have a wellness check order for a minor named Avery Boone issued this morning by... I know what you have, and, he said, I know who signed it, and I know what it was built on. He kept his voice level. I'm going to ask you to wait. I can't wait indefinitely. The order, 12 minutes, he said. I'm asking for 12 minutes. The girl's mother is at Appalachian Regional Hospital right now, filing a formal complaint documenting 4 months of abuse by the man who submitted the affidavit supporting your order. He held her gaze. That complaint, when it's on file, will create a legal conflict with your order that any judge, including Judge Harmon, is going to have to address before a welfare removal can proceed. He paused. You can take her now, and be part of the story of how a little girl was temporarily removed from her support network because of a filing built on fraud. Or you can wait 12 minutes. Carla Webb looked at him. She looked at the badge on her lanyard, then at him again. I'll wait outside, she said. She stepped back from the doorway. Ronan turned around. Avery was looking at him. She was still on the couch and still holding the handlebar, and she said very quietly, How long? 10 minutes now, he said. Maybe less. She nodded. Her knuckles on the handlebar were white. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Travis Kane's voice. You think you're clever. The sound of it, flat, controlled, the specific register of a man who has practiced managing his emotions in public, landed in Ronan's chest like something blunt. Travis, he said, you walked into my house with 5 men and you took my family. They were never your family, Ronan said. A pause. You have no idea what you've done. The control was thinning just slightly. You have no idea who you've disrupted. The people connected to this, You think it stops with me? You think Danny is the only... He stopped himself. Ronan went very still. Say that again, he said. Silence on the line. Who else, Travis? Ronan said. You should walk away, Travis said. His voice had gone back to flat. Take your club and walk away and this all goes quiet. Elena gets her daughter. Everybody goes home. That's the deal. There's no deal, Ronan said. Then there are consequences. Not a threat. A recitation. The voice of someone reading from a prepared statement. For you, for your club, for the woman, for the... Ronan hung up. He looked at Eddie. Who else is connected to Travis Kane in this county? Not Danny. Someone above Danny. Eddie looked at him slowly. There's been talk, he said. For a while. About Harmon. The judge. Not just the golf. Eddie's voice was careful. There's a name that comes up. A county commissioner, man named Sutter. He and Travis went to school together, grew up together. Sutter's been on the county board for 12 years. He paused. There's money, Ronan. Quarry contracts, county development projects. It's not just one man protecting his brother's girlfriend. It's... Ronan's phone went off. Shepard. He answered. It's filed, Shepard said. The complaint is on record. Timestamped 2 minutes ago. And Ronan, the mandatory report triggered an automatic flag. There's a state-level domestic violence investigator who just got pinged because of the prior medical records. The pattern... Shepard paused. This is above Harlan County now. This is a state file. The state. Above Harlan County. Above Judge Harmon. Above Commissioner Sutter and Danny Kane and every piece of the infrastructure Travis had built at the county level. Ronan turned to the doorway. He stepped onto the porch. Carla Webb was standing on the front walk, arms crossed against the cold, her phone in her hand. She looked up. The complaint is filed, Ronan said. Time-stamped 9:07 this morning. The case has been flagged at the state level. He looked at her directly. Your order conflicts with an active state domestic violence investigation. You know what that means. She looked at her phone. She was reading something. Her face moved through it. I need to make a call, she said. Make it. She turned away and put the phone to her ear, and Ronan stood on Eddie Morrow's porch in the November cold and listened to the sound of the infrastructure Travis Kane had built, encountering something it hadn't been built for. A state-level flag, a paper trail with a timestamp, the weight of a pattern documented by people whose job it was to document patterns, and who had no relationship with Judge Harmon or Commissioner Sutter or anyone who played golf with anyone. His phone went off again. Dart. He answered. Danny Kane just got a call on his radio, Dart said. Patrol dispatch. He's been pulled from his current assignment. A pause. Internal Affairs wants him at the station. Who called it in? Don't know yet, but it's moving fast. Another pause, the kind with weight. Ronan! There's a car on Route 9 heading toward Eddie's Street. Not county, not patrol. It's Travis's truck. He's coming here. He looked down the street. The county vehicle was still at the curb. Carla Webb was still on the phone. The gray sky pressed down and the cold pressed in, and somewhere in the distance the sound of a vehicle moving fast on a county road was getting less distant, and Brick was already looking in that direction, already straightening from his lean against his bike. Brick, Ronan said. I hear it, Brick said. The truck came around the corner hard, way too fast for a residential street, and hit the brakes when it saw the vehicles. Saw the bikes, saw the county car, saw Ronan on the porch, and it stopped in the middle of the street. Not at the curb, the middle of the street, the engine running, not cut, the exhaust rising in the cold air. Travis Kane sat behind the wheel. He was looking at Ronan. Ronan stepped off the porch. He walked down the front walk and through the gate and onto the sidewalk and stood there, and the distance between him and Travis's truck was 30 feet of cold residential street and absolute silence. Carla Webb had lowered her phone. Brick was completely still. Travis got out of the truck. He was holding something. Not a weapon. Papers. A folder, thick, the edges of it visible in the gray light. He walked toward Ronan with the particular walk of a man who has decided that forward is the only direction, and his face was doing something Ronan had not seen it do before, which was nothing. Not anger, not performance, not calculation, just forward, just the motion. "It's done," Ronan said. "The complaint is filed. The case is flagged at the state level. Danny is being pulled. Whatever Sutter is going to do, he's going to do it in the middle of a state investigation, and I don't think he'll find that comfortable." Travis stopped. "You don't know what you've touched," Travis said. "Tell me," Ronan said. "It doesn't stop with one filing." Travis's voice was almost conversational. Almost. "There are people in this county who have been comfortable for a long time. You want to make them uncomfortable, that's your choice. But they have reach, and they have patience. And when you go home tonight—" "I'm not going home tonight," Ronan said. Travis looked at him. "I'm going to be right here," Ronan said. "And tomorrow, I'm going to be right here. And whenever whoever you're talking about decides to make their move, I'm going to be right here when they do it." He looked at Travis steadily. "And I am not alone." As if to confirm the statement, the sound reached them before the headlights did. The low, rolling, unmistakable sound of multiple Harley engines coming down the county road. Not fast, not aggressive, just coming. The sound of something that had decided to be present. And when the bikes turned onto the street, 6 of them, 7, the full roster of every member who'd gotten Dart's call that morning, they came without theater, just pulled to the curb one at a time and stopped, and the engines cut one at a time, and the men got off and stood there in the November cold in their cuts, and nobody said anything. Travis looked at them. He looked at the folder in his hands. He looked at Ronan. And Carla Webb said from the front walk, "Mr. Kane, I've just been informed that the wellness check order you supported has been suspended pending a state-level review of the case file." Her voice was professional and exact. "I'm going to have to ask you to step back from this property." Travis didn't move. "Mr. Kane?" Inside the house, behind the curtained window, a small hand pulled the fabric back 2 inches. Avery, looking out, looking at the street, looking at the bikes lined up at the curb and the men standing beside them, and the man 30 feet away, who was holding a folder of papers that didn't mean what he'd needed them to mean. Travis Kane stood in the middle of a residential street in the gray November morning with his careful years of infrastructure coming apart in ways he hadn't been able to predict. And he looked at Ronan Creed, and what was in his face in that moment was the thing that had always been underneath the control and the performance and the paperwork and the bought relationships. A small, contained, very cold panic. The panic of a man who has built his entire world on the premise that other people can be made to comply, discovering that compliance has a limit and he has reached it. He looked at the folder in his hands one more time, and then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. Whatever name was on it, his face changed. He answered it. He listened for 4 seconds. His jaw went tight enough to show the muscle. "I understand," he said into the phone. His voice had gone flat in a new way. Not the flat of control, but the flat of someone receiving instructions they don't want to receive. He lowered the phone. He looked at Ronan one last time. "This isn't finished," he said. "No," Ronan agreed. "It's not." Travis Kane got back in his truck. He drove away. The street went quiet. The particular quiet of aftermath, of something that had been building for hours and days and years, arriving at a temporary stillness that was not resolution but was something before resolution, the held breath before the last thing happens. Ronan stood on the sidewalk. Behind him, Dart had come to stand beside him without sound. "That call," Dart said quietly. "The one that made him leave." "Yeah. I think I know who it was." Ronan looked at him. "Commissioner Sutter," Dart said. "I think Sutter just told Travis to stand down. I think the state flag scared him, and he's cutting Travis loose." He paused. "Which means Travis Kane is about to stop being protected by his infrastructure and start being exposed by it. Every man who helped him is going to start building distance." Another pause. "And a man who's being abandoned by his infrastructure, who has nothing left to lose, is the most dangerous version of that man," Ronan said. Dart nodded. The front door of Eddie's house opened. Avery came out onto the porch. She was still wearing the clothes from the night before, and her hair was still held by the insufficient rubber band, and she was holding the blue bicycle by the handlebar, standing at the top of the porch steps looking at the street, at the bikes, at the men, at the empty space where Travis's truck had been. She looked at Ronan. "Is it over?" she said. He looked at her. He wanted to say yes. He opened his mouth, and Dart's phone went off, a specific tone, the one he used for urgent contacts only. And Dart looked at the screen, and his face did the thing it almost never did, which was change visibly, which was show something that in another man would be called alarm. And he looked at Ronan and said 3 words that made the cold air colder. "They have Elena." They found Elena in Travis's truck. Not taken violently, cornered. He had been waiting in the hospital parking structure, 2nd level, the blind spot between the concrete pillars where the cameras didn't reach. And when Shepard had walked her out, he had been there with the truck running and Danny beside him. Danny still in uniform. Danny, who had not yet been formally suspended and whose badge still meant something in a parking garage at 11 in the morning. Shepard had put himself between them, and Travis had said one thing: "Step aside, or I make a call that ends your club tonight." And Elena had said, quietly, "Shepard, don't," and had gotten in the truck herself, because she was Elena Boone, and she had spent 4 months making herself small to protect the people around her, and the habit was not yet fully broken. Dart got it from Shepard in 30 seconds of clipped, controlled sentences. Ronan was already moving. He didn't tell Avery. He looked at Eddie, and Eddie nodded, and the door closed, and Avery was safe behind it, and Ronan went to his bike, and the men came with him without being asked. All of them, the full line of them, engines up in the cold air like a single sound made by many throats, and they rode. Travis hadn't gone far. That was the thing about men who act from panic. They don't have a plan for afterward, only for the moment of regaining control, and once they have it, they don't know what to do with it. He had driven 6 blocks to the far end of the hospital campus, to a service road behind the maintenance building where the traffic was nothing, and he had stopped there. And when the bikes came around the corner in a line, he was still sitting in the truck with Elena beside him and Danny outside the passenger door, and the whole thing looked exactly like what it was, the last move of a man who had run out of board. Ronan stopped his bike 20 feet from the truck and got off. Travis got out. Danny stayed where he was. "It's done, Travis," Ronan said. "She's coming with me," Travis said. His voice had lost everything, the control, the performance, even the flat-managed anger. What was left was something raw and less constructed and more dangerous for being both. "She's coming with me, and we're going to go somewhere and talk, and you're going to get back on your bike." "Sutter called you," Ronan said. "An hour ago. He told you to stand down. You didn't." He looked at him steadily. "Danny, Internal Affairs wants you at the station. You know that. You've known it for an hour." Danny's jaw moved. "Whatever he promised you," Ronan said, not unkindly, "he can't deliver it anymore. Sutter's already building distance. The state file has your name on a report from the Sycamore Street visit last night. That's a record. That exists." He paused. "You can add this to it, or you can walk away." Danny looked at his brother. Travis looked at Danny. And Danny Kane, 36 years old, 6 years on the force, who had spent those 6 years being the thing his brother needed him to be, looked at the truck, looked at the woman inside it, looked at Ronan, and took 3 steps back and put his hands in his pockets and looked at the ground. Travis made a sound. Not words. Something beyond words. The sound of a structure collapsing. The sound of a man watching the last piece of his architecture refuse to hold. The passenger door opened. Elena got out. She walked to Ronan and stood beside him and didn't look back. And Travis watched her do it with the expression of someone who is finally, completely, understanding that the thing they built was never what they thought it was. "It's over," Elena said to Travis. Her voice was quiet and absolute. "It's over." He looked at her. He had no more moves. The paperwork was invalid. The judge was exposed. The deputy was backing away. And 7 men in leather were standing on a service road in the November cold with all the patience in the world. What was left was just a man standing next to his truck with nothing. When the sheriff's department cruiser came around the corner 2 minutes later, not Danny's cruiser, a different one, 2 officers responding to Dart's call from 30 minutes ago, Travis Kane was still standing there. He didn't run. He had nowhere to run to. He put his hands up with the mechanical compliance of someone whose body has understood something his mind is still processing, and the cuffs went on, and they walked him to the cruiser, and the door closed. Danny was taken separately, quietly, by a 3rd officer who arrived alone. The service road went still. Elena stood on the cold pavement with her arms at her sides and she breathed. Just breathed. In and out, deliberately, the way you breathe when you are checking to see if it's real, if the weight is actually gone, or if you've only imagined the absence of it. She breathed 3 times. Then she turned and looked at Ronan. "Avery," she said. "She's safe," he said. "She's at Eddie's." She closed her eyes for 2 seconds. Then she said, "I want to see her." They rode back in the thin gray mid-morning light, Elena on the back of Shepard's bike with her arms around his jacket and her face turned into the wind, and the bikes moved through the Harlan County streets with the particular unhurried weight of something that had been necessary and was now finished. And the cold air was just cold air. Avery opened Eddie's door before they reached the porch. She looked at her mother, and her mother looked at her, and neither of them said anything for a moment, just stood in the doorway of Eddie Morrow's house with the November light around them. And then Elena crossed the porch in 2 steps and put her arms around her daughter, careful of the wrapped ribs, but holding her, really holding her, and Avery's arms went around her mother's waist and held back, and neither of them spoke. Ronan stood at the bottom of the porch steps and watched. He thought about Caitlin. He let himself think about her this time, not sideways, not managed, just directly. Her face, her age, the night he hadn't been there. He thought about the 11 years of carrying it and the particular complicated thing it felt like to be standing on a porch, watching a mother hold a daughter who was still here, still whole, still able to hold back. It was not absolution. He had never been looking for absolution. It was something smaller and more real than that. It was enough. The weeks that followed moved differently than weeks usually moved in Harlan County. Travis Kane was held on charges that expanded as the state investigation deepened. The forged contact notification in Coulter Wynn's case alone was a federal matter, and when that thread pulled, others followed. Commissioner Sutter resigned before charges were formally filed, which fooled no one. Judge Harmon recused himself from 3 active cases and quietly requested retirement. Pauline Voss withdrew from Travis's representation within 48 hours and said nothing further publicly, which was its own kind of statement. Danny Kane cooperated. It was not heroism. It was the arithmetic of a man calculating what he had left to protect and finding the number smaller than he'd thought. But his cooperation put names on paper that needed to be on paper, and Dart said, when Ronan asked him how he felt about it, "A tool is a tool. Doesn't matter why it works." Coulter Wynn's case went to a federal review. The forged notification was vacated. His parole violation, the contact attempts that had never reached Elena, was reconsidered in light of the documentation. It took time. Everything took time. But it moved. Elena and Avery moved into a new apartment in the first week of December. 3 rooms on the 2nd floor of a clean building near the school, radiators that worked, windows that let in whatever light the winter was offering. The Black Vultures brought furniture, carried it up the stairs without ceremony, set it where Elena pointed, left without requiring thanks. Hollis brought a kitchen table. Cage brought 2 chairs that matched. Marlene brought a casserole and a lamp she said she didn't need anymore and was clearly lying about. Shepard came every week for 2 months to drive Elena to her medical follow-ups. He didn't make conversation about it. He just showed up on the days she had appointments and drove and waited and drove back. And she stopped saying thank you after the 3rd time because she understood he didn't need it. Avery got her bicycle fixed properly. New tube in the back tire, chain cleaned and oiled. The bell tightened on the handlebar where it had gone slightly loose. Brick did it in the Roos garage on a Saturday afternoon with Avery watching every step, asking questions he answered without condescension, and when he rolled it back to her, she rang the bell once, experimentally, and the sound of it in the concrete garage was clean and bright. Spring came the way it comes in eastern Kentucky. Slowly, then all at once, the hills going from bare gray to every possible shade of green over the course of 2 weeks in April. Avery rode her bicycle everywhere. She rode to school and back and through the county park on weekends, and once, on a Saturday in May, she rode all the way out to the roost on the county road with the world green around her and the air warm for the first time since October. Ronan was in the parking lot when she arrived. He looked at her. She looked at him. "You rode all the way out here," he said. It's only 2 miles, she said. He almost smiled. So it is. She got off the bicycle and stood it against the roost's wall and looked at the bar and the parking lot and the hills behind it, and she said without looking at him, "My dad is getting out in August." He had known this. The Federal Review had moved faster than expected, and Coulter Wynn's remaining time had been substantially reduced. "I know. My mom talked to him." A pause. "On the phone." "I know that too." She looked at him then. The dark, precise eyes, a little older than they had been in November, even though not much time had passed, the eyes of someone for whom a lot had happened in a short time, and who had integrated it without pretending it hadn't. "She cried," Avery said. "After, when she thought I was asleep. But it was good crying. I could tell the difference." He looked at her. "You can tell the difference," he said. "I've had a lot of practice," she said simply. He was quiet for a moment. "You doing okay?" he said. He asked it the way he asked things, directly, without the cushioning that adults usually put around the question when they asked it to children, the cushioning that was really about the adult's discomfort with the answer. She considered it seriously. "Better than November," she said. "Still not all the way okay, but better." "That's how it works," he said. "Is that how it worked for you?" He looked at her. She held his gaze with the patience of someone who has earned the right to ask. "Yeah," he said. "Something like that." The sound reached them before the bikes were visible, that deep, rolling, unhurried sound coming down the county road. And then they came around the bend in the hill one by one, the afternoon sun on the chrome, the black vultures riding back from wherever they'd been. No urgency, no particular destination, just moving through the world the way they moved through it. Avery watched them come. She had one hand on her bicycle handlebar, the small silver bell warm in the afternoon light, and she watched the bikes come down the road and pull into the parking lot one at a time, the engines cutting one by one until the sound was gone, and all that was left was the Kentucky afternoon. The birds, the wind in the new leaves, the distant sound of a truck somewhere on the highway. Ronan stood beside her. He thought about what family was, not the idea of it, the actual, practical, daily fact of it. Who shows up? Who stays? Who drives you to the appointment without needing to be thanked? Who fixes your bicycle on a Saturday and answers your questions without making you feel small for asking? Who stands in the doorway at 11 at night so that the thing behind the door cannot reach you? He had learned it late. He had needed to learn it twice. He looked at the girl beside him, 10 years old, nearly 11 now, standing in the parking lot of a bar called The Roost, with her hand on a blue bicycle and her chin level and her eyes taking in the world with the careful, earned attention of someone who has already discovered that the world does not automatically protect you and has decided to be present in it anyway. He put his hand briefly on her shoulder. One moment, then he took it away. "Come on," he said. "Marlene's going to have food." Avery rang the bell once. She walked the bicycle toward the door, and the Kentucky sun went on going down behind the hills, warm and unhurried, the way it had always done, the way it would keep doing long after all of them were gone. And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead looked like it belonged to the people walking it,